Good evening and welcome to Talk Drive Time. I am Harry Cole of The Sun with you until 7 p.m. Be gentle, this is my first time. I will be joined by Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, the thorn in the side of both Sir Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch. He's beaten both of them in some of the polls. We're going to cover a lot of ground, and if you've got a question for him, it's your chance to ask the man himself. So I'll tell you how very shortly. Also tonight, two-tier justice, the smoking gun. The Conservatives are gearing up to challenge a controversial new sentencing guidelines that some say favour criminals from ethnic minorities, religious and gender groups. That sparked an almighty row with accusations of discrimination against white Christian men. Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick is threatening a judicial review unless Labour changes the law to block the new rules. We'll have a lot of that on the ongoing story. And meanwhile, Trump, Brussels, Zelensky, the so-called coalition of the willing is beginning to take shape. Up to 20 countries could back Sir Keir Starmer's plan to send peacekeeping troops to Ukraine. As the PM scrambles for support, Donald Trump, meanwhile, ratchets up the pressure on the Ukrainians to agree a peace deal. But peace at what price? Armed Forces Minister Luke Pollard will be joining me next to discuss that. And finally, does the BBC really need an £125,000 a year diversity and inclusion manager? The national broadcaster seems to think so. We've got all the details of that coming up. So, get in touch. You can call me on anything you like, but why not speak to Nigel Farage? 033 444 991 1000. You can WhatsApp 03444 again, 991 1000. Or text TALK to 87222. Or you can send me a message on X at talkTV. As I said, it's my first time. I can't wait. But let's get going. Joining me now is my superb colleague, Jack Elson, chief political commentator for the chief political correspondent. There we go. I'm the commentator today, not the correspondent. Jack, you've been all over this two-tier justice story all day, all of yesterday. What's the latest in it, and how badly is it going down? Well,
let me tell you, Harry, the government are in a massive tailspin with this one. It's going to be really damaging for them. Just to backtrack, you know, we've been covering this extensively at The Sun. It's been covered vociferously on Talk today. What it basically boils down to is this independent sentencing council getting these new guidelines for judges, which means that they will have to take into account, before they decide whether to send someone to jail, someone's ethnicity, someone's religion, and whether someone is transgender or not. Now, this essentially means that they could get a softer sentence, i.e. if you are from an ethnic background or are transgender, you could avoid jail. Now, people have been going on about two-tier justice and being called conspiracy theorists because of it. This is the evidence. Two-tier justice was,
Keir Starmer's been out on the airwaves for months, and since that sort of two-tier Keir moniker was developed, denying there is any concept of unfairness and biasness in our justice system. You know, we've got the famous image of Lady Justice blind there with the scales. This does look like a smoking gun, right?
Totally.
And what are the government going to do? Because, call me old-fashioned, they've got a massive, great stonking majority, and if they wanted to change the law, they could do that, with a flick of the pen, really.
So since we broke this story yesterday, the Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood's initial reaction was essentially, now to do with me, Governor. They are a sentencing council which are independent. It's a panel made up of about 15 judges, which are outside her control.
Do we know who these judges are?
We do. They are public. You can go on the Sentencing Council website and see exactly who they are.
Are you going back to the office shortly after this to trawl through the names of all of those judges and find out what they're up to?
Well, one of them was Baroness Carr, who quite recently ticked off politicians for daring to question the rulings of court outcomes. But what Shabana Mahmood has done today is written to the Sentencing Council, exercising her displeasure at their rulings, saying that as an ethnic minority person herself, she is absolutely aghast at the idea of two-tier justice and has threatened to legislate, if necessary.
Threatened to legislate? Wow.
To wield that government's massive majority, which you talk about, to essentially overturn their ruling. But Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, he's been the one that has really forced this, because he has threatened a judicial review. He's hired a judge to do it if necessary. It's a real problem for the government.
Let's listen to Robert Jenrick now, who was on Talk earlier.
These sentencing guidelines were signed off in a meeting with all the bigwigs from the legal system, including her own representative, one of the most senior civil servants at the Ministry of Justice. So either she knew about this and it is her policy, but now she's having to change tack because people are so furious with it, or she was totally asleep at the wheel, had no idea what was going on in her own department. Either way, it's a terrible reflection. Look, I think there is creeping two-tier justice in this country. It's two-tier justice under two-tier Keir, just as you and many others have argued for a long time. We have to stop this now. The Sentencing Council have to scrap these guidelines. If they won't, we should be changing the law and ending their independence so that we don't have this situation going on forever.
Now, joining me now is Luke Pollard, the Armed Forces Minister. Luke, you've got a massive brief at an incredibly dangerous time in the world. But before we move on to that, I do just want to get your response to this two-tier justice allegation. Were you as surprised as the Justice Secretary herself seemed to be yesterday when the story broke?
Well, this is not acceptable. Let's be absolutely clear. Everyone should be equal under the law. Now, this sentencing guidelines comes from the Independent Sentencing Council, but the consultation on this happened under the last Conservative government. It happened when Robert Jenrick was in the Home Office.
But it was dismissed as crackers at the time, I believe, by the former Justice Secretary who said no way.
Well, Robert Jenrick was in the Home Office when this was going through the Home Office with internal consultation. Let's be absolutely clear.
Yeah.
We don't want any form of two-tier justice. That's why Shabana Mahmood's been absolutely clear on this, that she's written to the Sentencing Council asking them to review their position. If they don't review their position, we'll be taking action legislatively using the powers that Parliament has, because it's right that the Sentencing Council is independent, but it's also right that decisions on minimum sentences are informed by what Parliament wants. And let me tell you, there will be strong support from Labour benches, just as I imagine there would be from other parties, to sort this problem out.
So you heard it here first on Talk. You're not going to put up with this. You're going to change the law.
Absolutely. We're not happy with this at all, because it undermines the justice system if we allow two-tier justice or the accusation of it.
Yeah.
And that's why Shabana Mahmood's been so clear on this today, setting out a clear path. This is not going to happen. We are going to make sure that everyone is equal under the law.
Luke Pollard, Armed Forces Minister. Sir Keir Starmer, your boss, is pledging to put boots on the ground and planes in the sky in Ukraine. Why should British boys be sent to fight, potentially, the Russians in a faraway land in highly controversial circumstances for another Labour Prime Minister?
Well, we're not suggesting at the moment that anyone is fighting. It's really important. What we've said is we want an end to this killing. We want a peaceful and durable, lasting peace in Ukraine. And as part of that, the United Kingdom and many of our European and Commonwealth allies are looking at how we can contribute to a security guarantee that would stop Putin from breaking his word, reinvading.
But peacekeepers get into trouble. Peacekeepers get fired upon. Peacekeepers die in combat. Look at what Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, said today. British boots on the ground, European boots in Ukraine, will be a direct and official involvement he says, of NATO members, and it will not be allowed. What's your response to Lavrov?
Well, this war could stop tomorrow.
It could, but it's not going to.
If Putin and Lavrov decided to withdraw their troops and their illegal invasion. But what we have to provide here is a lasting and durable peace. That's what President Trump has been very clear on. That's what President Zelensky and his people desperately need. The way we have to do that is making sure that President Putin doesn't use any pause, any peace, as welcome as it would be, to reconstitute his forces, to rearm and then to go again. Because he's done that before. He's broken the ceasefire before. When he invaded in 2014, there was a ceasefire afterwards. He broke that in 2022 because there was no sense from him that there would be any consequences. Having UK forces as part of a multinational effort that guarantees and defends that peace is an important part of it. But to
that's an acceptable risk, you believe, to British lives?
Well, Ukraine's security is our security, so we're not stepping up in doing so just because it stops the killing in Ukraine, although that hopefully would be a consequence of this. We're doing it because we know that the UK can play a serious role in keeping Ukraine safe, NATO's eastern flank safe, and the UK safe at the same time. That's why we have troops in Estonia at the moment on the Russian border.
Would they be moved into Ukraine? What happens to poor Estonia?
We need to maintain our support for Eastern European countries as well.
Luke, with all due respect, you can fit the entire British Army in Wembley Stadium and still have room for the away fans. What credibility does this pledge have, given that we've got 1,000 troops in Estonia? How many people are you actually willing to commit to this, and where are they going to come from?
Well, you're absolutely right that our armed forces have been hollowed out and underfunded by the last government.
And the government before that, I would argue.
We've started making steps to address that, fixing the retention and recruitment crisis. But I think at the heart of what you're asking there is a reasonable question. Will it make a difference? Will us stepping up help? And the answer is absolutely yes. We need to bring this war to an end. The way we do that is by working with our allies, not just Europeans. We need the Americans involved as well. That's why
Donald Trump saying no to that. He's saying, no, let's actually get a peace deal. Let's actually get a peace deal first before we start talking about backstops and underwriting and US protection. And frankly, look at what he's just done to the Ukrainians. American support and underwriting these days ain't what it used to be when he can turn off intelligence sharing with a flick of a pen.
Well, you'll appreciate that I can't comment on intelligence sharing.
I'm not going to ask you to comment on that directly.
You'll know that, but the important piece here is if we need and want a lasting and durable peace, which is what President Trump himself has said that he wants to achieve, the only way to stop Putin pausing, rearming, giving his troops a bit of a break and going again is to make sure that we have a security guarantee force in Ukraine, but also US firepower available as a deterrent. Now, that's why that security guarantee matters on both sides of the Atlantic.
You're not going to tell me about intelligence matters, but something you might be able to talk to me about. So Keir Starmer is, he's having a good week. He's cajoling people. He's obviously, we can talk about his domestic record another day, but he's, on the world stage, he's clearly out there trying to rapidly get to a solution to this. How long can Ukraine fight if the Americans continue to stop them using our Storm Shadow missiles through their intelligence and targeting? And how much stock have they got? This could be over very quickly, right?
You have to remember that when the Russians invaded in 2022, the Ukrainians decided to fight without any allies. They're now, 3 years on, have support from not only the UK, but allies right across the NATO alliance.
Yeah.
We have been providing them with military equipment. We're continuing to do so. In fact, in Washington at the moment, my boss, John Healey, the Defence Secretary, has just announced...
He gets all the good gigs. He gets to go to Washington and you get to come see me. So.
Well, I think I'm winning there, Harry. But the point is, in Washington, he's just announced $30 million alongside the US Defence Secretary for attack drones to support keep Ukraine in the fight. We are going to continue stepping up because Ukraine's security is our security, but we have to realise that every single day this war goes on, Russia is inching ever so close, an inch closer to Ukrainian cities. We know that we have to stop those Russian advances, support Ukraine in being able to do so. The only way we can do that, and I think this is important, there's lots of good talk about peace. It's very welcome. But the way we jeopardise a peace is forgetting about the war. And that's why the support is continuing from the UK and our allies, while we'll continue to step up and support Ukraine's efforts.
You say we continue to step up, but let's talk about this, because 2.5%, we finally got there, good news, defence spending is going up. But then is it? Because 2.5%, lots of experts, lots of military veterans, brass, you name it, some of your colleagues in the Labour Party, some of your colleagues in the opposition, say that 2.5 is nowhere near enough. And 2.5% by the end of next year is nowhere near enough. It needs to more realistically be something like 3%, not after the next election, now.
Well, I mean, we've been clear that 2.5% is a path on the way to 3% in the next Parliament. But, I mean, the reason why we've commissioned a defence review, that report in the spring, is it's not just how much we spend, it's what we spend it on. And speaking frankly, the Ministry of Defence has been pretty hopeless at spending money well over the last decade. So we need to reform the MOD, but we also need to learn the lessons of the war in Ukraine. That means the military we need to deter and to defeat any adversary in the future needs to learn the lessons of Ukraine, more uncrewed systems alongside crewed systems, more deep fire.
More drones, right?
Well, we still need an awful lot of people to support
Is it still Labour Party policy to increase troop numbers by 10,000?
All the decisions when it comes to the size of our armed forces will be published in the defence review when that comes out.
Sounds like a no, though. But you went into the last election saying that
there's no point starting a review unless I
that's just classic Starmer, though, isn't it? Review, inquiry, kick it down the road a bit. But you promised before the election.
That's absolutely not right.
We
said that we'd have a review. We started that review. It publishes very shortly. That will set out a radical transformation of our forces.
You said before the election to the voters that you would undo Tory troop cuts and you would increase troops by 10,000. Is that still the Labour Party policy?
All the configuration of the forces is being set by George Robertson, the former NATO Secretary General.
But you're the minister. Why do you need him to do it? You promised the voters it. Deliver it.
I mean, the whole point of having a review, Harry, is that they can look at the details and we can respond to it. But we're already taking steps to support our forces. Now, for every 100 people that join our armed forces currently, 130 leave. Yeah. That's the inheritance that we have from the Conservative government.
Well, I think that says a lot. I mean, frankly, why would anyone join the... I'm going off on a tangent now, but it's a good tangent. Why would anyone actually join our armed forces and stay in our armed forces these days when, by all accounts, they risk the fact that you're going to sail them down the river in 30 years' time? And, look what's happened in Northern Ireland this week with the ruling over the SAS, that soldiers doing their jobs now face jail.
No, a career in the armed forces is a brilliant career. But what we've also said very clearly in the House of Commons, John Healey saying it only last week, is that we will back our veterans.
Will you back them, though? Because Keir Starmer at PMQs yesterday refused to even really engage in it and wouldn't necessarily say that he wouldn't back a judicial review.
No, we will back our veterans. We've made that clear.
Will you back a judicial review into the decision made in Northern Ireland that is basically making these soldiers comparable for and facing prison time?
So we're looking not only at the decision that's been made now, but also potential decisions that may be made in the future. And so what we're doing, we've been very clear on this. We want to back our veterans. We think a career in the armed forces is a brilliant career. It's a good career. And for any of your listeners that are thinking about joining up, they've got a great opportunity. We've given the armed forces the biggest pay rise in 20 years. We've increased recruit pay by 35%. And importantly, we're dealing with the utter shambles of armed forces accommodation, of our brave men and women living in accommodation with black mould, leaky roofs, by bringing 36,000 homes back into public ownership so we can fix them and support our troops.
All incredibly expensive, though. Is the MOD still down?
And the right thing to do.
Absolutely, but is the MOD still down for $3 billion in efficiency savings starting on the 1st of April into the next year? I believe that's the amount that the MOD have got to find. Efficiency savings often mean cuts, right?
Well, I mean, as a new minister in the department...
You're not that new. You've had enough time to look under the bonnet.
Oh, I mean, that's precisely the sentence I'm trying to get out. As a new minister in the Ministry of Defence, let me tell you, we have some incredibly brave people, but we have inefficient systems. It takes too long to make decisions. Defence procurement is utterly broken, meaning we're buying obsolescent equipment expensively and slowly. Now, we need not only to spend more on defence, absolutely, the Prime Minister set that out, we need to spend it better.
But isn't any pay rise, any pay sort of budget increase next year, it's going to be swallowed up very quickly into the, as you said, the pay rises you've given troops. Then you've got to pay lots of employer national insurance, thanks to Rachel Reeves, on a whole host of jobs. Inflation is blighting the arms manufacturing industry. Everything's more expensive to produce. This is what I mean about, is 2.5, next year going to be enough? When actually you've got to find these $3 billion efficiency savings, and you've got massive increase in costs. So you're basically increasing defence spending to tread water.
Well, the extra £13.4 billion in cash terms, from where we are today to where we will be in April 2027 will make a substantial difference in terms of supporting our armed forces, in terms of renewing our armed forces. Because what worries me is if there is a real threat to our country that we have to use our armed forces for, I want to be absolutely certain that all our people we commit into battle to defend our country and our allies have the right equipment and have the right strength. At the moment, we know that there's more to do on retention and recruitment. We know there's more to do in terms of equipment, but that's why this increase in defence spending was announced by the Prime Minister, 2.5% by 27, 3% in the next Parliament.
Hand on heart, do you think 2.5 in 27, 28 is going to be enough, or do we need more? Are we not going to come back to this in a couple of months' time and think, actually this looks, woefully inadequate?
No, I do think we need more. That's why we're committed to 3%.
No, but more, not after the next election, not in the next Parliament, now, as Putin's eyeing up Trump and we're committing all sorts of pledges of planes in the sky and troops on the ground in Ukraine. It kind of, from where I'm sitting, looks like we are woefully underprepared for all of these promises we're making. We're writing cheques we can't cash.
I mean, I have absolute confidence in our forces. If we ask them to do something, they'll be able to do it. What I want to have the ability to do is to make sure that we're equipping them with the very best equipment that learns the lessons from Ukraine. That's not about how Ukrainians fight. That is also about how Russians fight. So that's why we're putting the investment in. That's why we've taken this deep review to make sure that we can re-engineer our forces to get it right. But let me tell you, if Putin wins in Ukraine, he won't stop in Ukraine. So that's why, as well as renewing our forces, we have to make sure that Ukraine stays in the fight, that they can guarantee the safety and sovereignty for their country, and that Putin can't win, because it won't just be Putin that'll be looking forward to a Russian victory. There'll be other nations that'll be threatening other countries, and that's bad for international security. It's bad for Britain.
Putin wins in Ukraine. I think we're going to have more. We're going to need more than 10,000 extra troops, which I'm going to give you one more go. Is it still Labour policy to increase 10,000 troops? Go on.
You will still get the answer when the Defence Review comes out.
Armed Forces Minister, thank you for joining us. Don't go away. Next we talk to the Sun's Jerome Starkey in Ukraine.
Russia has interfered with the elections of the countries that were not at war, right? We have seen it, even the United States. So the risks that if for some reason, somehow, technically, we would be able to conduct some elections, the risk that Russia will influence it is huge. And again, like, why should we? Ukraine is very good in telling our presidents if they're not performing well. We had revolutions, right? So it's up to Ukrainian people to tell our president if he's not working well for Ukrainian people.
Hello, I'm Harry Cole. This is Talk. Welcome back. Now, 20 countries now could join Keir Starmer's coalition of the willing. Whether they'll put boots on the ground as promised by Britain and France remains to be seen. But a man that does know all about that is Jerome Starkey, the Sun's defence editor, who is in Ukraine. Jerome, how are you there? Got your head down?
Harry, yeah, very good, thank you. Good to see you.
Jerome, I don't know if you heard my interview there with the Armed Forces Minister Luke Pollard, but plenty there essentially saying we're going to need a lot more than 2.5% in defence spending if Ukraine lose this battle. How's the mood there after what has been, frankly, a fairly torrid 10 days for what is meant to be our ally?
There are, I think, two distinct reactions. There is a real sense of anger and betrayal. People are cross. They feel that they've been stabbed in the back. They're fighting Russia on one front, and one of their most powerful ally has turned on them in Washington, D.C. And you see that anger manifest in many ways. But for me, the most visceral manifestation was when I was in a field hospital. I saw surgeons, frontline surgeons, knuckle deep in human gore. And after they'd saved a soldier's life as they were cleaning up afterwards, they turned to me and they said, should we be wearing a suit? And of course, that's a reference to the attack on President Zelensky for not wearing a suit when he was in the Oval Office. There is concern, but the other reaction is, of course, that they just have to keep fighting. They haven't got a choice. The war is raging all around them. For the soldiers on the front line, and we've spoken to them, we've spoken to, I spent time in a gun position just yesterday. They can't stop. They can't pause because of what's happening. They haven't been affected by the lack of intelligence, the stop of intelligence. They've still got enough ammunition to keep their gun firing for now. And that's what they're doing. So they're fighting on because Russia hasn't stopped attacking.
That's crucially what I was going to say. How long can they fight for? How long is for now? Are we talking days, weeks, or into the summer?
I think we're talking into the summer. It's months, certainly. I think the most cautious estimates would suggest 2 months. I've seen other estimates suggest Ukraine can fight at least 6 months. One of the last things Joe Biden did before leaving office was to send through a huge tranche of military aid. So Ukraine is stocked up, but not all weapons are equal. Yes. Clearly. And some of the most valuable, precious, high-tech stuff is what they'll run low on first. And the most obvious thing is Patriot missiles. Patriot missiles defend places like Kyiv, where I'm talking to you now, from the nightly Russian missile and drone attacks. So without those weapons, people will die because Russia launches missiles almost nightly at Ukraine's built-up populated areas. And of course, the other thing is if Trump has turned off the supply of intelligence, that will also lead to deaths because that American intelligence has become part of the jigsaw puzzle, which helps Ukraine detect missile launches. So that I will get alerts on my phone throughout the night tonight telling me when there are air raid sirens going, because that's partly down to American satellites detecting missile launches. It's partly down to radars and all sorts of other technology, some of which is American, a lot of which is Ukrainian, and a lot of which belongs to Ukraine's allies.
Jerome, what do you personally, I know what the Ukrainians think they've been stabbed in the back, but you personally, you're a man of geopolitical knowledge, and there must be some method to this. Is it a tactic? Is it about showing the Russians that actually Donald Trump could be a fair negotiator between two sides? Is it the fact that he's panicking and the Russians don't appear to be showing any sign of coming to the table? Or is it, what do you think it is? It surely can't just be a bully who's enjoying it.
I think the people who see strategy in what Donald Trump has been doing are perhaps letting hope triumph over experience. I think Donald Trump is exerting all the levers at his disposal to try and force Ukraine to the table. He's humiliated President Zelensky. He's turned on an ally, and he has threatened repeatedly to abandon NATO and to step away from Europe. Whether or not that is a strategy, it is going to have repercussions which I don't think he has foreseen. Allies need their allies to be reliable, and if they're not reliable, that makes them effectively not credible, and credibility is key to deterrence. So I think not only is he creating panic, is Donald Trump creating panic in Ukraine, he's creating huge panic or disquiet, certainly around NATO. And then think about the consequences for all the other countries, not the NATO countries, not America's adversaries or NATO's adversaries, but those countries in the middle who might be choosing which way they're going to side. Are they going to side with the democracies of the world or the autocracies of the world? And I think this presents a golden opportunity for China, for Russia to say, look, America's unreliable. You can't trust them. They're fickle. They'll go away.
Jerome,
and
we're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid. Look, stay safe. Come home soon. Bring me a bottle of vodka as you did last time. But lots to chew over there, and send my best to your comrades out there. Look, we're going to be joined by Nigel Farage next, a man who knows Donald Trump pretty well. So we should be able to get some answers on that. Nigel Farage, leader of the Reform Party, will be joining us on Talk. Get your calls in. He's coming up next. Hello, I'm Harry Cole. This is Talk Drive, and joining us now is Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform. And why not speak to him yourself? 03444 991 1000. Hello, Nigel. How's it going?
Hello, Harry.
Thank you for joining us. So, star of the Sun today, all over page 10. You've got a great big piece about the lunacy of net zero, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But first of all, in that piece, you talk about how Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, seems to have a bit of a bee in his bonnet about you. In fact, he's almost obsessed. He's mentioning you every time at PMQs. You're getting under his skin, aren't you? Why is that?
Yeah, he's given up attacking Kemi Badenoch. It just seems to be reform, reform, reform. I think they realise that there is a sort of, a Labour vote, a patriotic Labour vote out there in the country, and it's got particular concentrations in the Midlands, the North and South Wales, and they know that the election victory they won was really an anti-Tory vote, much more than it was a pro-Labour vote. And I was told that over the Christmas period, they had private polling done of up to 40,000 Labour supporters. And the results, when they looked at them, scared the life out of them. So that's why they're having a go.
Well, there is a theme to their attacks, though, at the moment, and that is Ukraine, it's Putin, and it's previous comments you've made. Why do you think they've got onto a point there? Do you feel like your supposed comments on Ukraine have left you open to a flank, a weakness?
You know, in 2013, just a year after Putin had been in number 10 Downing Street, right, as an honoured guest, I made a comment that I admired him as a political operator, but in the same sentence, didn't like him as a human being, wouldn't choose to live in Russia, and didn't like the number of journalists that appear to have gone missing or been murdered. That's the only comment I've ever made about Putin that you could even describe as being favourable, in one half of a sentence. Look, they're desperate. They're absolutely desperate. They're going to throw as much mud as they can, but it's just not going to stick.
But you've said Ukraine is a corrupt country. That's what Putin says. You've said that Ukraine needs elections, which is also what Putin says.
Hang on a second.
No, I know, but is there?
I shave in the morning. I'm sure Putin does as well. None of that's relevant. None of that. Ukraine is, and has been for many years, one of the most corrupt countries that there is. And every index, every examination confirms that. But that is not the point. The point is that Putin launched an invasion of a sovereign country, and that was wrong at every level. Why
are you able to say that? You're very comfortable to be able to say that. Let's talk about your good mate, Donald Trump. What is going on? We were talking to Jerome Starkey, our defence editor, earlier. It doesn't seem... is he playing a game? Is there method to this madness? Or is he just given up on Ukraine and doesn't like them? Why is he so seemingly more sympathetic to the Russian case? And I'm not suggesting he's an agent or he's implanted by the KGB or any of that nonsense, but it does seem that he has taken a side in this, and it's not the side of Ukraine.
We've no idea. I've no idea what his conversations with Putin have been, and nor have you.
Yeah.
We don't know what's happening here. Remember, everything with Trump is a game of chess. It's moving a piece. It's anticipating what comes back the other way. And I don't know. This attempt at peace is just beginning. It's not over, and it's a big mistake to prejudge any of it. I tell you what I would say, though. To those who think that a peace negotiation's wrong, what is their alternative?
Yeah.
Is it endless war? I mean, Boris Johnson, kept saying, Ukraine will fight, Ukraine will win.
Well, Putin must fail, and that is the end of the war. But you're much more comfortable, and obviously, as Trump is, with a negotiated peace from where we are now, rather than going back to February 22.
I'm much more comfortable with peace than another million battle casualties and Russia winning.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the worry, isn't it? The worry is that Ukraine are running out of men.
Yeah.
That ultimately, if this attritional war goes on for years and years and years, is the worry. The loss of life, the sheer level of casualties is astonishing.
And would a reform vote to put British peacekeepers on the ground in Ukraine? Is that a party policy you can get behind?
I don't think it's possible. I mean, I'm not saying there are no circumstances in which I'd back it, but I don't actually believe it's possible, and here's why. For every one man or woman that you've got in the front line or up near the front doing a peacekeeping role, you need between 2 and 3 behind in support.
And we don't have those numbers.
We simply haven't got the numbers. We literally have not got the numbers. So number one, from a practical standpoint, it's very, very difficult. And secondly, we entered into, in Afghanistan in particular, an open-ended commitment without any end in sight. How long are those peacekeepers going to be there? 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, or like the Americans in Korea, over 70 years?
Well, they're still there. They're still there now. Nigel, let's move on. Let's talk about your piece in The Sun this morning, the net zero lunacy. So, chemicals industry in this country, cement making, British car making, steel making, all being decimated. You are sort of almost crediting reform surge in these former Labour industrial heartlands with linking it directly to net zero. Is that really what you're seeing, or are you just sort of jumping on a bandwagon that you think's a credible one?
A bandwagon? Are you having a laugh? When I was talking about this, I was considered a lunatic. Richard Tice and I were warning about net zero years ago.
Well, you and Philip Hammond as well. I think probably the only thing you got in common with Philip Hammond was he was saying this is a £1 trillion project.
Well, I knew there had to be something somewhere we agreed on. No, Tice and I were arguing about this when it was a very unpopular thing to say. We were the bad dudes, you know. But now people are waking up. Two things are happening here. Number one, people's energy bills have been 15 to 20% higher than they should be for the last couple of decades to subsidise renewable energy. And guess what? Nobody in the Labour or Conservative parties ever dared to tell them. But secondly, we are going, and yes, of course, there are some jobs. There are some jobs in wind. There's the odd job in solar. I don't dispute that. But it's far outweighed by the industrial massacre that is going on. And even the Climate Change Committee accept we will be using oil and gas, maybe in decreasing volumes, but still significant.
Yeah.
We may be using oil and gas until 2050. And all we're saying is if we're going to do that, why not produce it ourselves rather than allow it to be produced, along with steel and other things, offshore in India, China, elsewhere, under lower environmental standards, and then shipped back to us.
Plenty.
All we're talking here is common sense.
Plenty of text coming in. We're going to do some calls with Nigel after the break. We have lots of text coming in. Nigel, there's a theme to some of these texts that are coming in. Firstly, one says, love, love, love Harry Cole. Thank you, Kath. We'll take that. But there's a lot of text coming in today about your old mate and colleague, Rupert Lowe. Now, he, I'm sure you've read it, popped up in a rival newspaper we're not going to mention that wasn't The Sun this morning, and he said it's too early to know whether Nigel will deliver the goods. He can do, but he's a fiercely independent individual, and it's been good so far, but he has messianic qualities. But will these distill into leadership? I don't know. We have to change from being a protest party led by the Messiah, which I think is you, but you are a very naughty boy, to being properly structured party with a front bench, which we don't have. We need to start behaving as if we are leading and not merely protesting. That is a shot across your bows, isn't it?
Party.
That's a shot across your bows, though, isn't it?
We are not a protest party in any way at all. That is utterly wrong. Utterly, completely wrong. We are an entirely positive party. Come to any reform event and the positivity, the energy, and perhaps you should come to one or two.
I've been. I came to your one in Birmingham. There were fireworks.
Well, look, do you know what? If I've got a following out there, that's a good thing. If I hadn't, we wouldn't have won any seats in Parliament at all on the 4th of July.
Including Great Yarmouth, I presume you put in that.
There wouldn't have been a cat's chance in hell, would there? Come on, be honest about it.
Well,
we're not a protest party, and he's on the front bench.
Yeah.
So what's he talking about? But with only 5 people, you can't really have a shadow cabinet, can you?
Well, you can fit the whole shadow cabinet in a taxi, can't you? So
we've got a lot of development to do, but we're absolutely not a protest party. And you know something? If you saw the level of development we've undergone in the last 8 months, we've created a constitution for the party. We've changed the share ownership and structure of the party. We've set up 400 branches around the country. Yeah, some are embryonic. And right now, within 10 yards of me, we are working hard to get 1,500 vetted candidates into the field for the English local elections on the 1st of May.
So why is Rupert Lowe going public with these comments? There's not something better to be had behind closed doors?
Well, perhaps he wants to be Prime Minister. Most people in politics do. You know that, Harry. Half the House of Commons.
I know you want to be Prime Minister. But
half the House of Commons think they should be Prime Minister.
Have you had a word with him?
His comments are wrong. His comments are wrong. We are making gigantic strides.
You told him to wind his neck in then?
no point telling him what to do or what not to do. Fact is, we are making huge strides.
All right, one more for the text. Got a text here from Josh that says, "What's happening to your grooming gangs inquiry? You promised a grooming gangs inquiry. When's that happening? Is that?
I wanted to push the guy. So we started off by threatening the government with legal action over the Manchester attackers. We said we'd take a private prosecution, right?
Yeah.
They responded, but the CPS finally pushing charges. We then said we would hold a national grooming gangs inquiry, and then the government slightly cut us off at the knees by announcing 5 of them.
So you're backing those ones.
5 going on, and if we can't do one that has legal power to subpoena people, so they've slightly seen us off at the pass there. It's disappointing, but without legal powers, there isn't much I can do.
Nigel, we're going to go to a break shortly, and we're going to get some callers, listeners, readers to throw some questions, maybe even harder questions than my ones. But before I go, what do you make of this 2-tier justice row thing? You were lambasted for saying that there were 2-tier justice in the country. Are you feeling a little bit vindicated today?
Lambasted?
Lambasted, lambasted, I know. What's the word? I'm just making up words now.
Jonathan Hall KC, who was the independent terrorism reviewer, wrote a piece in a rival newspaper yesterday, literally, word for word, vindicating what I said after Southport last year, for which I was accused of stirring up malcontent and riots and all the rest of it, and I was right. We do have 2-tier policing. We do have 2-tier justice, and it's little wonder that the government minister responsible yesterday said she did not support what these sentencing guidelines did. You know, the more we divide people up into you're black, you're white, you're Asian, you're straight, you're gay, you're goodness knows what else, the more we do that, the worse it is for our country.
Nigel Farage, you're right. Rupert Lowe's wrong. Stay there. We're going to go to a break. You want to speak to Nigel? 03 444 99 1000. Don't go away. Farage meets the listeners next.
Many others across the country received an email from the Ministry of Justice, Shabana Mahmood's own department, telling them that this was now the rules that they should be abiding by from the end of the month. So how she didn't know about this, God only knows, but that was the case. We got it into Parliament. Now we've got it, thanks to you and many others, into the living rooms and in the newspapers across the country. We've got to stop this. I don't want to live in a country where you are treated differently depending on whether you're a straight white man or a Hindu woman. This is totally wrong, and it has to end.
Hello, Harry Cole here on Talk Drive. Still with me, Nigel Farage, and a red-hot switchboard of callers waiting to put their questions to the leader of Reform. First of all, we've got Sean in Kent on Nigel's column today in The Sun. Sean, are you a Kentish man or a man of Kent?
I think I'm a man of Kent, but Nigel...
I'm a Kentish man myself. So, Sean, go ahead. What's your question to Nigel Farage?
Well, I just wonder, Nigel, why you are so keen on imported foreign gas rather than good, patriotic, homegrown, British renewable energy.
I'm not sure you read the article.
I did.
If you'd read the article, you would have seen that 3/4 of the way down I said that rather than import gas, we should be producing our own gas and creating tens of thousands of very well-paid jobs. And the point is, the more we rely on wind and solar, the more backup with gas we need. And I'm just struck that we shouldn't be importing any gas when we've got more than enough in this country. The same argument applies for virtually, not quite, but virtually the whole of the oil industry. And I want to extend that, Sean, to steel. Why do we close down plants in Redcar and South Wales to then be told that the production will go to India, where the steel is going to be produced under lower environmental standards and then shipped all the way back to us? So, I mean, frankly, there's nothing doctrinaire about what I'm saying. I think it's just plain common sense.
Sean, you want to come back on that quickly?
Yeah, I do, because I don't know where he's going to get the gas from, because the North Sea is a declining basin and the gas is sold on international markets anyway. And fracking, frankly, there's no hope of getting permission for that because people don't want it. So at the moment, we're dependent on imported oil and gas. Much better to double down on cheaper renewable energy, which is British-made and we can control.
Oh, yeah, great. And then when you get a big anticyclone over Britain and the lights go out, what are you going to do then, Sean?
Well, you have backup, don't you? But it doesn't need to be more than 50%.
With what?
Well, you have it. What do you mean?
What do you back it up with when the wind stops blowing?
Well, with 5% gas,
No, Sean. Last month there were days when it was 60% gas, right? 60% of our electricity at some points last month was burning gas, 60% of which was imported. That is lunacy.
Right, we're going to leave that one there. Sean in Kent, thank you. Next, we've got Philippa in Dorset. Philippa, it's a question I would want to ask him as well. Go ahead.
Hi, Harry. Hi, Nigel. So lovely to be on the show and speaking to you, Nigel. Firstly, I want to thank Nigel for his personal response to my email this week. It was lovely to hear your thoughts about disability in the NHS. My question to Nigel is, how are you going to feel being our next Prime Minister? And what is the first thing you're going to do when you're in 10 Downing Street?
Thanks, Philippa. Nigel, what's on the to-do list?
How will I feel? Honoured. What's the first thing I'll do? Well, no doubt, get a cork out of something and have a little minute of celebration. And then, having spent the previous year to 18 months planning everything, getting everything in place, being ready to move fast, stand on the steps and announce what we're going to do in our first week. And I expect, Philippa, that we'll hear howls of protest from the left, from the militant unions, from some of the teachers, from half of Whitehall. And I know that the necessary steps to turn around the decline, the societal and economic decline that this country is in, will not be easy. So a brief moment of celebration and then straight into battle.
That sounds like quite the manifesto, though, Nigel. What are you doing to make people howl? Come on, what's really going to make them squeal?
Oh, virtually everything. Virtually everything we stand for will be hated by the left in Whitehall. We know that. We understand that. We've seen these things before. Harry, we're in decline. Philippa, we're in decline. We all know we're in decline. Nothing works anymore. The average Brit's getting poorer. People fear going out after dark for crime in our cities. We know we're in trouble. We know we have to turn this around.
Philippa, thank you. I think we've got Martin in Cambridge. Martin, what's your question for Nigel Farage?
Hello, Nigel. My question is that we've been governed by imbeciles for the last 20 years. I mean, the political class is just hopeless. And what we basically need are like star chambers of high-tech, high-quality people who know industry, who know law, who know immigration. I mean, the people like Henry Bolt and Peter Blakely who come on the talk, they talked common sense about policing and immigration. My suggestion would be we get the top people in all from industrial policy and everything, town renewal, and we actually deep dive. What are our problems? By people who actually know what they're talking about. We have people making decisions at the moment with the arts degree in ancient history on net zero. No wonder we're in the state we're in.
Nigel?
Well, Martin, you better come and join my team of advisors, because I like what you're saying and I agree with it totally. Look, the idea that, virtually everybody in the cabinet and every ministerial position has to be a career politician in Parliament who's done very little since Oxford University is utter nonsense. And I agree with you. We need people. It's funny, Gordon Brown, actually, of all people, did do a bit of it. He got a guy called Digby Jones. He chucked him in the House of Lords as business minister. He was a guy with deep experience of the world way before being involved in politics. We need people who know their onions, but we also need hard-nosed people who are prepared to look at spending, prepared to look at efficiency. To run a private company, you literally have to mind the pound, shillings and pence. It seems that culture doesn't exist in the public sector. So some pretty radical changes needed. And to make that happen, you'll need men and women with a business brain, not necessarily, as you say, a degree in something else.
Thank you, Martin. A government of all the talents would be a reform administration. Dave, County Durham, what's on your mind?
Hello, Nigel.
Hello.
Hello, sir. It's about the oil industry, and I'm a supporter of you. I'm an ex-oil industry myself, and it's the fact that you've got all these companies who are taking the profits. They've got to make a profit to keep themselves going, and not a lot is coming back into the country. Now, if you look at what Norway did with Statoil, all the profits going back into the country. And that's the one failing that I feel that all successive governments have made a cock up on.
Dave, I'm going to disagree with you ever so slightly. I get where you're going, that the Norwegians at the start of the North Sea boom, and by the way, we could have done this, at the start of the North Sea boom, the Norwegians set aside in their own national fund a percentage of the profits from North Sea oil and gas. And now it's one of the biggest, national funds in the world. We chose not to do that. But don't think the oil industry isn't taxed. Actually, if you invest in the North Sea and make a profit, your taxes are now, and it started with the Conservatives, your taxes now are over 75% of your profits. Your losses are 100% of your losses. And because of that, firms are now, firms that have been there for half a century are now withdrawing. So they are paying tax. The difference, Dave, with respect is this, that money goes into general taxation. None of it has been set aside for a proper national fund. And that should have happened 50 years ago. And if, as I was saying earlier, we decide, rather than being 40% of our oil and gas being produced by us, become 100% of our oil and gas that we need being produced by us, I agree with you, a national fund would be a great idea.
Dave, thanks for your call. Let's do a couple of texts because we haven't got much more time with Nigel Farage. Text here, Nigel, suggesting that if you make over 75's free reform membership, you could hit 1 million. What do you reckon of that?
Well, look, at the moment it's 25 quid unless you're a youngster. I hear what you have to say.
All right, and what about reformers' prospects in Wales? Dan in Cardiff says, what are you going to do to win the Senate in a couple of years' time? And who are you going to put in charge of it?
Well, we're going to have a big conference in Wales on the 11th of May, once the English counties are out of the way. We're very optimistic for what we can do in Wales and indeed even in Scotland too. But you know what? Right now, all my energy, all my efforts are focused on the English local elections on the 1st of May. If we can clear that hurdle successfully, I'll talk to you about Wales until the cows come home.
All right, very quickly, one final call. Tom in Bournemouth. Keep it quick, Tom, but what's your question to Nigel Farage?
Hi, Nigel. Yeah, I just wondered, I don't watch a lot of Parliament, but has anybody asked Keir Starmer outright a loaded question along the lines of, would you agree that the more people that come up from the Middle East means that the higher knife crime and sex crimes will be? I'd assume that he wouldn't say no or disagree.
Nigel, you've been campaigning against the campaigning for the government to release various statistics on crime. How's that going?
Harry, you're right. The government now hides statistics in terms of crimes committed per nationality or geographic region. I'm not aware particularly at all of a knife crime linked to the Middle East.
Yeah.
What I do know about knife crime in our big cities is it does tend to be one ethnic community to another. And so the idea that stop and search is racist is absolute baloney, because actually it is members of the ethnic minorities that stop and search would protect.
Nigel, I'm going to give you one more go. We're going to have to let you go in 20 seconds, but Rupert Lowe, will he still be a Reform MP by the next election? What do you reckon?
Well, I hope so, but he seems to be taking a tone that says he might not accept us, but there you are. Maybe he'll be...
Thank you, Nigel. You've been brilliant for joining us. Thank you. Don't go away. Evening and welcome to Talk Drive Time. I'm Harry Cole of The Sun and I'm with you till 7 p.m. Coming up, two-tier justice, the smoking gun. The Conservatives are gearing up to challenge the controversial new sentencing guidelines that favour criminals from ethnic, religious and gender minorities. It's sparked an almighty row with accusations of discrimination against white Christian men. Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick is threatening to judicial review Labour unless they change the law and block these rules. Justice Secretary says she's already urged the Sentencing Council to scrap the guidelines. Lots more on that ongoing story coming up. Meanwhile, over in Brussels, the so-called coalition of the willing is beginning to take shape. Up to 20 countries could back Sir Keir Starmer's plan to send peacekeeping troops to Ukraine. And as the PM scrambles around for support, Donald Trump ratchets up the pressure once more on President Zelensky to agree a peace deal. But peace at what price? Armed Forces Minister Luke Pollard was on the show earlier. We'll listen to some of that back again. And finally, does the BBC really need a £125,000 a year diversity and inclusion manager? So it sounds like good money. The national broadcaster seems to think so. We'll have the details of that from the man who broke the story in a moment. But join in the conversation. Give us a call. 03844. Oh, sorry, I knew I was going to mess that up eventually. 03444. It's 991,000. I'm going to get that right in a moment. Same number for WhatsApp and 87222 on the text. Start your text with the word talk or send me a message on X. Let's try it one more time for the calls. 0344 99 1000. I think that's broadly right. Try it, we'll give it a go. But joining me now is Isabel Oakeshott, a talk regular and I suspect a keen watcher of all things in the Reform Party. Isabel, did you hear my interview there with Nigel Farage? And what did you think of that astonishing drive-by on one of the most popular members, Rupert Lowe?
Well, I thought that Nigel Farage answered your question with characteristic diplomacy. He said he must want to become Prime Minister. We all do. And you know as well as I do, having worked for so many years at Westminster, I mean, it's pretty hard to find an MP that doesn't literally think that they could be Prime Minister, that they have what it takes. And evidently, Rupert Lowe falls into that category. I'm sure this is causing much merriment on the left. You know, they'd like nothing better than a little fantasy of Nigel Farage not being the leader of Reform Party. It isn't going to happen. So we can all have a lot of fun talking about Rupert Lowe and his ambitions, but he's not going to replace Nigel Farage.
The path to Brexit and the path to where Nigel Farage is now and the path to reform and the Brexit Party and UKIP before it, though, is littered with people that is, you know, the bodies of people that Nigel Farage has sort of fallen out with. It does seem to, you know, the comments that Rupert Lowe made about a messianic figure who must learn to delegate, not everything can go through one person. These are not complaints these are not new complaints about Farage's leadership style, though, is it?
Well, I think there are only 5 Reform MPs.
You can fit them in a cab.
They absolutely have got to work together. You know, that is their strength, and they've each got their individual talents. And Rupert has been brilliant on the immigration side of it. Obviously built up quite a lot of following on that. And obviously on agriculture, he's got a special interest in that. And, you know, each one of them has got their area that they focus on. And I think Rupert would be best to maximise his attentions on what he's really good at and let the leader lead the party.
Let the leader lead the party. This sounds like this could be the sort of inner workings of the Conservative Party for the last 40 years now. I mean, maybe it is a sign that Reform have grown up as a political party when they all start slaying into each other publicly. But do you think that some of the Elon Musk stuff doesn't help, though? We saw, obviously, Elon Musk over Christmas have a bit of a wobble about Nigel. He's been giving huge amounts of backing to Rupert Lowe. Do you wonder whether some of that's gone to his head?
Well, certainly something's gone to Rupert Lowe's head. As I say, you know, a lot of novice politicians get delusions of grandeur when they enter the Houses of Parliament. Something happens to them. You know, I've seen this 1,000 times. You know, people that were really quite nice and normal outside of the Palace of Westminster, and I'm not talking about any particular side of politics here, you know as well as I do. This is very common affliction. Something happens to them when they get into that rarefied place and they suddenly think that they're king of the world.
It's
or whatever.
The greasy pole. There's, you know, suddenly you go from being nobody to having a 1 in 650 chance of being perhaps the leader of the country. It does perhaps play on people's minds. Isabel, what did you make? I'm pretty sure I know what you're going to say, but what do you make about the latest twist and turn in the tale of two-tier Britain?
Well, I think I genuinely am shocked by this story. I mean, perhaps I shouldn't be shocked. It's a really serious matter because all these months under the Starmer administration, you know, we on this station have talked repeatedly about two-tier justice. And, there are many examples of that under this administration, the most egregious being the one in relation to the Manchester airport incident, in which it took so many months for anyone in any position of authority to decide that there was any case to answer, despite the compelling video evidence. So we've talked about this, and yet never has there been anything so black and white as this new sentencing council guideline, if that's what it's technically known as. I mean, I read it with genuine disbelief. Now, if you look a bit further into it, here's the thing. The politician that has been leading the way on this has been highlighting what's happened here is Robert Jenrick, and I think he's done a great job on that.
He's finally actually focused on his own brief for once, which is justice. He seems to be straying across everyone else's and commenting on all things. So good to see him doing his day job. And when he does it well.
Perhaps his view is that if the party leader is clearly not commenting on what everybody else is talking about, then, I'm sure Robert Jenrick and his colleagues feel that someone has to say something. They are supposed to be the opposition party after all. But what I was going to say is, well done to Robert Jenrick for highlighting this. He's done a great job on this and a number of other things. Very good on Chagos recently. But there is just one problem. It turns out that on closer inspection, all of this was put in motion under the Conservatives. So they can't really say this is all some kind of Labour horror show, though that it certainly is, because it started off being a Tory horror show.
To be fair, they did dismiss it and publicly said it was outrageous. But we did invite Alex Chalk on this show, the former Justice Secretary, the last Justice Secretary of the Conservatives, who did sort of oversee that, as you say, did reject it, but did oversee it. But funnily enough, he was washing his hair this evening, so could not join us. Isabel, stay there. I'm going to bring in Jack Elsom, a keen watcher who's actually really should be on deadline and writing the paper right now, but is here once again. Upstairs at Talk. Jack, what's the latest on this? Shabina Mahmood is clearly very, very annoyed. She clearly has been blindsided by this, these sort of, once again, sort of anonymous lefty committees of do-gooders who seem to rewrite the rules and actually wants the government to find out about what the government's doing. The government is furious. I mean, she looks a bit pathetic, though, doesn't she? Yeah, there is a big political blame game going on here. The Tories are blaming Shabana Mahmood. Shabana Mahmood is blaming the Sentencing Council, also blaming the Tories, saying that they put the wheels in motion for this. It's musical chairs, though. The music has stopped on her watch. It definitely has, and while she might say in protest and sound and fury that this is an independent body, I think that most people will look to their elected politicians who set the law and can legislate to do something about it. If Keir Starmer doesn't have this massive majority, then what is it good for if he's not going to actually use it? And I think that many people are now thinking, you need to step up and do something. Dominic Cummings makes the point that often it seems to be that it's unelected quangocrats that seem to be running this country, and that governments have their hands on the levers of power, but rarely use it, and instead they are pulled by people, experts, arm's-length bodies, which the Sentencing Council is. We do have some white smoke this evening, which is that Shabana Mahmood has written to the Sentencing Council. We've now got sight of that letter, and she is threatening to legislate, to overrule them, a power she currently doesn't have. Don't you dare make me use my massive majority and actual powers I've been elected to use. How long to come on, Jack? How would it work? I'm going to put you on the spot here. Pop quiz. How can they do it? Could they do it through a statutory instrument? Would they be able to do it with the flick of the pen? Would they have to pass a new law? This is an independent arm's-length body. Without any change, these guidelines are going to come into force on the 1st of April, April Fool's Day, fitting, I think, for this. How does she actually stop it? Because clearly there's no one in Parliament that's going to oppose it. Well, it just so happens that there is a big piece of legislation currently going through Parliament called the Crime and Sentencing Bill. I knew you'd have the answer to this. The Crime and Sentencing Bill, and the Tories are pressuring them to amend this bill to give the Justice Secretary powers to overrule the Sentencing Council if there are guidelines which they put forward which they do not believe are in the public interest at all. And so that would then give the Justice Secretary and the Ministry of Justice the legal teeth to potentially overrule some of these judges who are on the sentencing panel. Jack, while I've got you here, I know you need to go and write because you really should be on deadline by now. But you've got a story, you've just broken it online. Tell us about the BBC's new diversity hire. Well, this just seems to be really setting the cat amongst the pigeons, this story. I mean, £125,000 is going to be the salary
Much more than I might. It's going to be. We can talk about that afterwards.
It's almost Jack Elson money. Yeah.
I might go and do that job. Actually, it looks quite cushy. I mean, you're in charge of diversity. You're in charge of inclusion. You're in charge of belonging.
I thought Donald Trump was re-elected to get rid of all this stuff, and America was going to sweep it away, and corporate America swept it all away. Well, why are we still doing this?
Well, this is the problem, because most listeners to this show will think that £125,000 out of the public purse in itself is an extraordinary amount of money, but it seems that the BBC is swimming against the tide here. When you take into context everything happening in America, scrapping DEI jobs across the board, also the fact that the licence fee is going to be going up by £5 next month in a matter of weeks on April 1st, and then you take into account the fact that Tim Davie is moaning about budget cuts. He's got a lot of other things on his plates, whether it's Gaza documentaries, woke programmes. It's not the BBC leave right out, and the public are going to be fuming.
Isabel Oakeshott, fancy a good job as the DEI content creator of the BBC? I think it sounds like a laugh, right?
Is there any grounds on which I might be discriminated in favour of to get this job?
I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is on that application form.
I could come up with, yes. No, don't think they'll be hiring me.
On the point, though, on the broader point, though, let's get serious for a moment. We need to have one serious point. We are looking across America, and from the FBI to Microsoft to Walmart, supermarkets have abandoned woke, Nike have abandoned woke. There seems to be a cultural shift within the United States, obviously in reaction to Donald Trump's sweeping victory and first 48, 49 days, whatever we're in now. Yet it doesn't feel like these same companies and these same organisations, the same people in Europe seem to be almost doubling down on this stuff.
Well, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I mean, the UK and Europe always lags behind America on pretty much everything. And I think, unfortunately, on this one, we're going to lag at least 4 years behind the US. If we get a radical change of government at the next election, which is an incredibly long way off, then we might see a bonfire of all this stuff. And, by the way, that would probably include this sentencing council with its budget of £2 million to do, I have no idea what, except make things worse.
Well, that's the problem with Quangos, isn't it? Once you give them a mandate, once you give them something to do, they just, they run out of regulating one thing, and they just have to keep regulating to keep surviving. It's sort of regulation to survive. It's exactly what happens in every time.
Yeah, well, I mean, so many of these groups need to be blown up. They all have multi-million-pound budgets.
That's the manifesto. Blow up the Quango. It used to be bonfire of the Quangos. Now it's just blow up the Quangos.
I like to go one better than the bonfire.
That's almost Trumpian of you. Stay there, Isabel. Look, Jack, our front page this morning. Has there been much reaction in Westminster to yet another absurd example of the ECHR being used to allow, frankly, a wrong-un to stay in this country? As an Albanian mobster, he's wanted on all sorts of charges in Albania. He's over here. He's tried to stay here for years, and it looks like he is going to be able to stay here because he's roaming the streets of Britain now. What's the reaction to that been? And how has Rishi Sunak gone down? The Prime Minister who a year ago said we couldn't leave the ECHR, no, that's impossible, it would damage our reputation on the world stage, we have to be nice and play by the international rules and laws, has come out now and said, we should leave the ECHR and unless it reforms.
A bit late for that, isn't it?
Exactly. I mean, the Tories must be, the Tories that were telling him to do that must be spitting tax.
Yeah, if only he had power. I asked the Prime Minister's spokesman about our front page this morning.
Very
essentially
good,
an Albanian mafia boss on the streets of Britain after claiming through asylum laws a right to stay here because he thought that he'd be persecuted if he goes back by rival gangs.
As well.
In secret courts, exactly. The Sun fought for 2 years to have his anonymity lifted against the judge's orders. Listen, the Downing Street's position is very much that foreign offenders who commit crimes in this country should expect to be deported. But it begs the question, which we put to the Prime Minister's spokesman, which is there have been many high-profile cases where human rights laws, the European Convention of Human Rights, have been exploited to be able to stay in this country against the wishes of the Home Office, against the wishes of the majority of the public interest. And they said that they give their complete backing to the ECHR. Now, I think it seems, and most of the public will be head in their hands with this because it seems completely incompatible where you have a justice system where both the public and the government want to get rid of somebody, but a foreign court and the diktats which they throw down allows them to stay.
How long will Yvette Cooper? I remember talking to Theresa May when she was still the Home Secretary. And she used to say, when she was, she ended up backing Remain, didn't she? So in her big sort of dilemma of whether to back Brexit or to back Brexit or Remain, she used to say the ECHR caused her far more problems than the EU ever did. So when Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer, and probably not Lord Hermer, we'll put him down as probably unreconstructable, when a Labour minister's going to wake up and go, you know what? These Dom Cummings of the world, the Simon Clarks of the world, the Robert Jenricks of the world, they were right. They were correct. We've reached the same conclusion. Do you think they'll ever get to that stage within this Parliament of going, you know what? Why are we doing this? Look at how Donald Trump deals with it. He says, you know that, UN, who, whatever, we're leaving it.
Well, they've certainly nailed their colours to the mast. I mean, Keir Starmer is an arch fence-sitter, and often he doesn't like to come down on one side or the other, but Ilmiss he definitely has, and he has said throughout not just his Labour leadership, but his premiership as well, that there's going to be no cutting ties with Strasbourg while he's in charge. It's a point that Lord Hermer, the under fire Attorney General, has made as well. As he will be described
in copy at all times. I think we can up from under fire to embattled.
Embattled, hanging by a thread, whatever sort of adjectives you'd like to ascribe to him. But it is, but it is a serious point at the moment, and I think that a lot of people are going to be very angry about this.
Isabel, what do you reckon? Do you think Labour will ever get there?
Labour, absolutely no chance. The question is whether the Tories will. I think voters are absolutely sick to the back teeth of hearing a steady stream of Tory leadership hopefuls saying that they might one day perhaps consider maybe, if but perhaps, leaving the ECHR. Some of them have done it. They never will, and as long as they never do, they're not going to be in government again anytime soon.
Isabel Workshop, lovely to see you as ever. Jack Elsom, good luck writing the paper.
I'll get back to file.
There's some good stories from Rupert Lowe there.
Fantastic stories.
Nick Pollard's got a good story as well. The Sun's pledge to 10,000 troops. That was a pledge made to the Sun, which Labour look like they're about to break. So, Jack, lovely to see you. See you tomorrow. Coming up after the break, we'll continue the conversation with Poppy Coburn from The Telegraph, a rival newspaper, but we're all friends here.
These sentencing guidelines were signed off in a meeting with all the bigwigs from the legal system, including her own representative, one of the most senior civil servants at the Ministry of Justice. So either she knew about this, and it is her policy, but now she's having to change tack because people are so furious. Either way, it's a terrible reflection. Look, I think there is creeping two-tier justice in this country. It's two-tier justice. We have to stop this now. The Sentencing Council have to scrap these guidelines. If they won't, we should be changing the law and ending their independence so that we don't have this situation going on forever.
back to Talk. I'm Harry Cole. Stand by. I've just been told there is a celebrity in the building who will be joining us later in this hour. It's Mike Graham. You thought he'd get him twice in one day. What a treat. But before that, we've got Poppy Coburn, assistant commentator of The Telegraph. Poppy, the Sun's pretty lively this morning and today, and I suspect tomorrow as well on this two-tier justice story. I suspect The Telegraph will be up there like a greyhound as well, right?
Oh, we already have been covering it like, well, I can't use that analogy. I think that's swearing.
What are you making of it? I mean, Labour seem to have sort of slightly boxed themselves into a corner here. A, being blindsided by it, and B, then trying to blame the Tories, and then C, sending a menacing letter. Do you think that's going to be enough to get the Sentencing Council to bow down? That lot don't seem to be like to be told what to do they?
I think the problem is that Labour don't actually realise who's running the country nowadays. I mean, you would have expected, after they saw what happened to the Tories, that the people who are actually wearing the trousers now in Britain are lawyers. You know, we are a country, it's not rule of law, it's rule of lawyers. And I think you could see this by having Judge Kennedy come out and say, how dare Robert Jenrick, he's like a mini Trump, criticise a perfectly legitimate, thing to criticise, which is a sentencing decision, which, as you said, is just encoding two-tier justice in the law. So I think, Shabana Mahmood sending a mean letter saying that she doesn't approve of this judgment and actually it was all done under the Tories. I mean, does anyone really take that seriously? From a government that, acted the way it did over, as our paper covered, Jonathan Hall, KC, coming out about the Southport cases, they're not particularly a government that's interested in objective truth. So I don't know. I just think it's posturing.
One thing that does wind up Keir Starmer, something chronic though, and I've put it to his face before, and he looks like he wanted to thump me when I did. Is this idea of two-tier Keir, this idea of two-tier justice in the United Kingdom? They hate it, but I can't see, and you might be able to find a way they're going to wriggle out of this. This is clearly the smoking gun of two-tier justice. It is two-tier justice enshrined.
Yeah, and it's not the only way that two-tier justice is enshrined in the UK. Let's remember that in the dying days of a Labour government, as Gordon Brown was on his way out, he put through the Equality Act, which is something that literally encodes the law that some people will be treated differently than others. So going a step further and approaching that approach, which we already have in law, it already applies to employment, already applies in politics. If you work in the public sector, the Equality Act will apply to you. Well, this is just another step. I don't believe that the Labour Party disagrees with this. Look at their selection mechanisms. Are they selecting people on the basis of merit? No, of course they're not. They agree with the ideology that's underpinning this. So I think what they're upset about is that it's, again, using that two-tier slogan, which obviously they take very personally. It's very catchy, two-tier Keir, it rolls off the tongue. They're still very touchy over the Southport disturbances and the riots. They're still very worried about that. They felt they lost control of the country in that moment. And I think they're really, really keen to get rid of a notion that they're not having equality under the law. But we don't have equality under the law. We have case law that proves this.
I tell you what doesn't roll off the tongue is the Talk phone number, which is 03444991000. I got it right that time. Look, there's cheers in the gallery. I'm going to keep practicing that one in the mirror when I brush my teeth. Poppy, let's look at the other side of away from Labour. The man that exposed this sort of flaw in the system, these new guidelines, Robert Jenrick, a man of the moment. He's lost about 2.5 stone. He's looking quite glam. He's had a glow up, he's had a haircut. He obviously lost the leadership election, but that just hasn't stopped him. He just carried on campaigning, and he seems to be the Tories' most effective sort of front bench voice. We've got Alex Burkhart, the shadow CDL, coming on later, but I'll put the same question to him. But is he just very good at his job, or do you think he still harbours ambitions to lead the Conservative Party, and actually each day he's just finding new ways to humiliate Kemi Badenoch?
Well, I think he's got one thing over Kemi, and that's that he can actually get up early in the mornings and start posting things. He's not running on Kemi meantime. I mean, obviously Jenrick's hungry for this. You can tell, but that's what you need in an opposition leader. I don't think you can do politics the old way. You can't be putting out pretty dry, press statements. You can't be getting spats necessarily with the party that's outflanking you to the right. You have to be looking at the government of the day and hitting them and hitting them and hitting them. And that is what Jenrick is doing in a way that I think is extremely effective. And, he's the man that likes the slogan. He loves two-tier kit. He's always tweeting out about two-tier kit.
He does. Who do you think Nigel Farage, we ran out of time before we could ask him this earlier, but who do you think Nigel Farage would fear more, Kemi Badenoch or Robert Jenrick? Robert Jenrick, I suppose, he thinks is a man he could possibly do a deal with, whereas Kemi is determined to go her own way. But which one do you think will hurt reform more in an election?
I'm pretty comfortable in saying that Kemi Badenoch is the leader that the Tories, that Reform want to be leading the Tories come the next general election. I think, yes, potentially they can deal a deal with Robert Jenrick, but they think he is pretty good at matching their outflanking strategy. So when they say something that they think Kemi can't come up with, Robert Jenrick's out there saying the same thing. He's hitting it harder, and I think he's getting a broader audience on the basis of doing that. So I don't think they really want to be going up against Jenrick.
And what about reform, though? Because we had Nigel Farage on earlier. Rupert Lowe made some pretty incendiary comments in, we have to mention it. It was the Daily Mail this morning, neither of our papers, but they had a great interview with Rupert Lowe this morning where he basically went for Farage pretty hard and said, he could be a good leader, but he needs to delegate more. He's messianic. He needs to sort of, he needs to share the love a little bit around reform. Farage has just hit back massively on our show where he said that he was completely wrong to say that Reform was a protest party. He thinks that Rupert wants to be Prime Minister. I mean, once again, we're seeing the Eurosceptic party, what was UKIP, then the Brexit party, now Reform. The tensions spill out into the public. But there's one thing in common with all those things. They seem to involve people getting annoyed with Nigel Farage. Reform are ahead in the polls. They are, in some polls, average polls, they're ahead. Are they about to blow it by having another one of their massive civil wars?
I think that may be the case. I mean, I also read that Rupert Lowe interview. I thought it was a bit Monty Python, actually, all the mention of he's the Messiah. But you're totally right. Nigel Farage is the most effective campaigner in Britain. Campaigner is not necessarily the same thing as a politician. I think he's very good at keeping one issue in the spotlight, hammering it home by force of his personality. But as Rupert Lowe says, that's not how you get into power. You need to learn how to delegate. And if you can't do that, then, Reform can't get a majority with one man.
It's hard to delegate where you can fit your entire front bench into a black cap, though, isn't it?
Well, for now, but if the polls are somewhat accurate, they could be running majority government.
So Reform say, well, Nigel there in our interview said he's going to do he's going to do an 18-month manifesto, and it's going to be a sort of bonfire of all this and all that and everything. Do you think they've got it? They're building branches. They've got new websites and bank accounts and professionalising the party, I think they call it. Do you think people want that, or do you think people are voting Reform because they like a bit of the chaos, right?
Oh, they like a bit of the chaos. They like the guy going down the pub and drinking a pint and saying what other people aren't willing to say. But I think they also want a party that can operate properly. The worst thing for Reform would be if they copy the Tories. They talk big and can't deliver. If that happens again, I have no idea what's going to happen to this country. I don't even know if we'll have a country at that point. And so they understand they have to get organised.
Indeed. Poppy, thanks for joining us. Nice to see you. Richard on the Costa del Sol says, getting Nigel. Nigel sounds like a leader, not a muppet. So he's got the vote. Well, I'm not sure if Richard on the Costa del Sol can vote, but he's got his support anyway. We want to hear from you. Give me a call, 03444 991 1000. Got it right that time, didn't I? Don't go away. Plenty more coming up after the break. Welcome back to Talk. I'm Harry Cole. Texts are flying in. Harry, you're doing a great show. Enjoying the show. Probably from my mum, I suspect, that one. Do you prefer a gin or a vodka martini? It says JT. I prefer a vodka martini dry with an olive, and I'm about, I reckon, less than 90 minutes away from one if all goes well. Let's take a call now, though. Dave in London's joining us. Dave, how are you?
Hi, Harry. How are you? Welcome to the home of common sense.
Thank you. I hope you're enjoying it.
Yeah, it's taken a while for me to get through because I keep phoning the number you've been giving out.
Oh, yeah, well, so yeah, you're probably on the phone with someone in Peru now, yeah.
Met police. No, I just wanted to... I put my head in my hands when you were interviewing Luke Powell, whatever his name is.
Luke Pollard, the Armed Forces Minister.
Luke Pollard. I mean, within the first 2 minutes, he used that great politician term, let's be absolutely clear.
Wow, it buys them some time to say something, doesn't it?
Yeah, then we went on to lessons to be learned. But I think the main story tonight, not just Rupert Lowe, I hope that doesn't also mess up reform. They got to stop doing that. But I think the big story tonight is people are really waking up to the fact that politicians no longer run the country. And they seem pretty impotent, to be brutally honest.
It's
so
true,
I think
isn't it? The quangos, when politicians have to say they're surprised by what an arm's length body, a quango, whatever you want to call them, that they've set up themselves and reports to them done, something's going majorly wrong within Whitehall that this wasn't spotted sooner. Why was this only spotted by the opposition in the House of Commons? It's crazy, right?
I've been saying this for many years. It's not just that council. Just about everything that happens in this country now, the politicians are not actually running the country anymore. And I don't know how we're going to get out of it. It's not like Trump. We can write a few executive orders and get rid of them.
Well, wasn't that astonishing watching him with the flick of the pen do 15 million different kinds of things without so much as somehow it will get bogged down in the courts, but executive power is not what it is over here. Is it there? Thanks for calling, Dave. You're not alone in thinking this. Text from Trevor, probably Trevor Kavanagh, actually, having just read it. Trevor Jenkins, in fact, though, says that the Prime Minister, you only have to watch Yes Prime Minister to see who exactly is running the country. The Prime Minister's come and go, but the civil service is there forever. Now, a man who has seen more than his fair share of governments, more than his fair share of civil servants, more than his fair share of budgets and chancellors is Sir John Redwood, former Conservative Cabinet Minister, respected beast of the Tory right, and a man who's, I think he still does his morning blog, but I used to crib off it and then pretend they were my thoughts and take them into morning news conference. But John Redwood, welcome to Talk. We've been talking a lot about two-tier justice and things like that so far in the show this hour, but I wanted to talk about something else. I want to talk about what's coming up at the end of this month, which is the spring statement. Rachel Reeves is going to have to, having maxed out the credit card once, she's promising no tax rises, but it looks like she's going to have to do a huge amount of spending cuts. Would you want to be in her position right now? And if you were John Redwood, what would you be doing?
Well, Harry, what a great intro. Yes, I still do my daily blog.
Good.
I'd love to be in her position. I think I could cheer the country up and give them a much better budget than the awful thing she served up last autumn, which killed growth, killed opportunity, depressed everybody, took all the confidence out of the economy, and it's left her with her own black hole. She's not going to get the revenue growth from people doing more work and having better paid jobs and businesses making more profits. So now she's got the reality crunch because she's constantly increasing the spending. They're putting all the wages up in the public sector without any extra productivity. What has she got to do, Harry? Well, she and her colleagues have got to manage the public sector better. You've been making very good points in this programme about how ministers don't have enough control. But if you've got a big majority like this government, you can take control. You can tell the civil service what to do. You can legislate if there are any independent bodies that are getting in your way. So please, Rachel Reeves, understand that tens of billions of pounds are going walkabouts into waste, and that's what you want to start tackling.
She talks about efficiency savings as a sort of cover for cuts, but do you really believe that the Labour Party, this Labour Party, even with its massive majority, has the political will or the guts? I think perhaps Rachel Reeves has the guts to do it, but do you really think all of those MPs sitting on 1,000 majorities all quite new to this game, having spent 15 years arguing against Tory austerity and crying foul at anyone attempting to take even a modest scalpel to the size of the state. Do you really think this mob are going to be able to take £5 billion of disabilities benefits away, reduce various other police numbers, all sorts of horrible things? They're going to just run away screaming, aren't they?
Yes, and I think they'd be better off looking at some easier targets to save the money. I mean, why won't they look at the 20, 30, 40 billion a year now that the Bank of England is losing on stupid bond trading? Yep. Many of the losses are avoidable. They're not allowed to go near it because the Bank of England's independent. The bank isn't independent on the bonds, and it's the taxpayers' money going down the drain. So please, Rachel, wake up. You've got an easier target. But there is a job to be done on welfare reform that you and I would agree about. The last government was edging towards it. There are far too many people who aren't making it into a job because of illness or disability, but some of them would be able to with the right kind of support and the right kind of benefit regime. Now, Liz Kendall and Rachel Reeves inherited some ideas on how to start fixing that from the previous government. I think they're saying they don't like all of those. Well, they need their own, and that's what they're currently working on. And it is a difficult task because you don't want to take not that much money away from people who are genuinely very disabled and never going to be able to work again. But on the other hand, you do need an incentive system and proper help so that those many people who think they can't work can actually see a way to work, particularly where it's mental health, because quite often a job helps you with mental health problems.
Yeah, I mean, I hear ministers say the right things. I just slightly worry that they might not. They might get a bit of a wake-up call, even with that massive majority getting it through the through the party. I mean, even a cut to aid saw a cabinet-level resignation. So the other thing I don't think anyone's talking about, John, I know you've spoken and we've talked about this in the past, is essentially the idea that Britain is sadly a health service with a country attached to it. Is there any plausible way you can see this government or a future government being able to grip NHS spending? Look at the 13 billion quid they gave them in the budget. Boom, gone already. They're already back asking for more, saying it'd been eaten up in pay rises. So how do they tackle that? And are you sensing any appetite other than from people like yourself and perhaps Nigel Farage, though he's gone a bit quiet on it these days? No one is really addressing the ginormous fact that the NHS is going to basically bankrupt the country eventually.
No, but this is another case of bad management and so-called independence. I mean, Wes Streeting's talking a good game in opposition. He's taking quite a long time to complete his review and do something. But something has just happened that you've reported on, which is that the chief executive of NHS England has decided to leave her job. So there is a huge opportunity because over the last 5 years, there's been a catastrophic collapse in productivity in the health service. The outgoing chief executive personally supervised or allowed the hiring of hundreds of thousands of extra people, but most of them were not patient-facing. They weren't the doctors and nurses and the extra appointments we needed. And so the work level didn't go up, but the staff numbers did. So there's been an almost unbelievable 18% loss of productivity, about 30 billion of extra cost. That's what you need to tackle. And either the Secretary of State has got to lead the management himself. Now there isn't a chief executive full-time and fully in post, or use the new interim chief executive to make sure that they do now start addressing this fundamental issue that the money and the personnel must be much more directed to the task of serving the patient.
Yes.
We need more beds and we need more staff to serve those beds. We don't need more middle managers. We don't need more inquiries into the background of the staff. And all that kind
I fear we might be barking up. We might be waiting a long time for that Dr. Bark, though, I'm afraid. John Redwood, I'm going to leave you with a pop quiz. 3 things, if you were Rachel Reeves, in a matter of 2 weeks' time, on the 26th of March, what would you do? What 3 things would you do to try and kickstart growth, turn things around, and find some money down the back of the sofa? In 30 seconds.
Cancel the awful tax rises on jobs and farmers and small businesses in the last budget. I would pay for it all and the extra spending that is needed on some public services by telling the Bank of England they've got to take at least 10 billion off the losses they are regularly sending to the taxpayer. I would want new management to lead the post office and the railway industry, which are also tipping billions of pounds down the drain and have very poor productivity and quality records. And I would start work on proper welfare reform, but it does need to be done sensitively, because the last thing you want to do is take money away from someone who is so disabled they can never work again.
Indeed, John Redwood. I think if Rachel Reeves is listening, as of course she is, she will be on the blower very quickly to you for a bit of help to come and write that budget. So John Redwood, Tory big beast, big mind, big brain, thank you very much. Right, we're going to go to a break. The celebrity has arrived. I can see him. He's in the building. He hasn't got a tie on, though. I only wore a tie because Mike Graham wears a tie in the morning. But don't go away. Mike Graham's next.
We start at the top with our politicians, our members of Parliament, whether it's in the House of Commons or the House of Lords. You know, we've had the expenses scandal, but the problem has not gone away. Even our dear leader, Keir Starmer, Mr. Freebies himself, you know, not exactly got a good track record himself, but there should be a root and branch about all of this stuff, because ultimately it's our money. At a time, our taxes are going up and our cost of living is going up on our essentials. We've been facing this.
Hello, this is Harry Cole on Drive on Talk. We've got the mighty legend of Talk, Mike Radio. Mike Radio? We'll just call you Mike Radio.
Just call me Mike
Graham,
Radio.
the Times of the Radio. Now, look, Rupert Lowe is causing some waves. Our interview with Nigel Farage is dividing opinion, I'd say. Mark in Lincolnshire says Rupert Lowe needs to stay in his own lane and keep reform united. Neil says, Harry, great first show. We hope to see more of you. We like him. Linda says, we're enjoying your show and Talk. You can come again. But also, lots of people are saying, actually, they agree with Rupert Lowe, and Farage is becoming more Trump reincarnated, says Neil. He says he's a narcissist. And how many times in that interview did you say, I did this, I did that? How can he build a party around that? Mike, are we about to see the Reformer, just as they're going ahead in the polls, going the same way as UKIP, the Brexit Party before them, and blowing up?
It is unfortunate, isn't it? But I mean, I suppose it's bound to happen. I mean, they did incredibly well at the last election, getting 5 MPs. Nobody thought they'd do that. I mean, some of us did think that, but most people sort of thought maybe Nigel Farage would be lucky if he gets one. But yeah, they're strong personalities, you know. But without Nigel Farage, the party isn't really anywhere. And I think Rupert Lowe, as Nigel said, as good as he is, has kind of been slightly impressed with the way that he's been going down and starting to believe some of his own publicity. Because, you know, some of the Americans have been, Elon Musk said it famously,
exactly. I mean, his tweet. I mean, you see it yourself. He absolutely flies on social media. Yeah. He's obviously got the sort of tech bro sort of backing on the grooming gang stuff that he was doing. Is it real, or is Elon Musk and co trying to?
I think the problem with relying on Elon Musk as your kind of main, protagonist who's going to be pushing for you is that Elon Musk is incredibly volatile. He's incredibly, difficult. Nobody really knows what he's going to do.
Sounds like he can work here, then.
Exactly. Yeah. From one day to the next, you don't know what he's going to say or do. Donald Trump today has just decided he's not going to put tariffs on Mexico, so that's all off the table. So if you suddenly start running around agreeing with Elon Musk and Donald Trump all the time, you're suddenly going to find yourself getting caught up and caught out, because you can't agree with everything they do, because they don't even agree with everything they do, because they change their minds every 5 minutes.
So history is littered. The path to Brexit, it has been, as we talked about this earlier, is littered with people who've crossed Nigel Farage. Though it doesn't seem to go,
and he's still there.
Well, exactly, and still brings in the crowds. Look, you're gonna love this. You know what? The first person I thought of when I saw this story was I thought Mike Graham, and I'm afraid it didn't hold for your show tomorrow morning.
Yeah, that's all right.
But the BBC are hiring a head of diversity, inclusion, and belonging.
Yes.
Don't forget the belonging.
Yes.
125 grand.
I know.
A
Brilliant,
year
isn't it?
of licence fee payers' money.
Yeah.
Will you be applying?
I won't be applying because obviously I'm not in the right area for that, because I tick all the wrong boxes. But you might not be surprised to know that we are quite ahead of the curve here, because Plank of the Week, which comes out tomorrow night, has the BBC nominated, not least for all sorts of reasons.
The whole BBC?
The whole of the BBC nominated.
Not just Tim Davie?
Not just Tim Davie, not just because of Hugh Edwards, not just because of the Gaza documentary, but also because of this ridiculous DEI department hiring. And the problem is that while Trump is getting rid of all of this nonsense, the public sector in this country, the BBC, the NHS, they're still doing it. They're still using it.
How long do you think before the sort of, what do we call it, long Trump, or, it used to be that America coughs and the rest of the world gets a cold.
Right.
But how long do you reckon that's going to take? Because, we seem to be doubling down on this.
Yeah. Well, it's happening in the financial markets, isn't it? I mean, all the big banks have now decided to start.
Well, they follow the money. They follow the money.
Yeah. And incredible, all those big consultancy companies, which proves to you that they didn't really mean it in the first place. They just pretended to be woke because they thought it might make them some money. But I think in the end, the trouble is there are so many people in this country that hate Donald Trump that they would like to keep him away, and they'd like to stop him from influencing what it is that we do. And we're supposed. How many times have you heard in the last week? We're much nicer than the Americans. We don't like.
We've
people
always
being
had a
rude.
British exceptionalism, haven't they?
Yeah, and the sense of fair play, and they don't really like Trump. Well, I'm sick to death of these politicians who want to be fair to people but want to stitch us up at the same time. Keir Starmer spends his entire life talking about fairness. He's the most unfair Prime Minister we've ever had.
Well, two-tier Keir, they call him, especially on Morning Glory with Mike Graham.
Exactly.
But here we have the smoking gun, don't we? We have two-tier Keir, the smoking gun.
Yeah.
This is it's there in black and white. You can get a softer sentence if you are a member of a protected minority.
I mean, somebody asked me the question today, given that British white people are a minority in London, does that mean if you're in London and you're up against a judge, you can actually claim that you're a minority and therefore you shouldn't go to prison? The whole system is ridiculous. The idea that they're going to give you a stronger sentence because you're white and you're male and you're British is absolutely nonsensical. And the idea that Shabana Mahmood says that she can't actually make them
she can
stop.
just legislate, right? She had.
I was reliably told this morning that she had one of her assistants in the meeting where this was decided, where this guidance was come up with. So it wasn't like this was a surprise to her. She's just now pretending that she doesn't like it.
Yeah.
They've been caught out.
I mean, that is the problem. I mean, it is the music stopping on their watch, and yes, they've only been in power for 8 months, but it is astonishing that someone clearly thought this was a good idea. No one apparently thought to tell the Secretary of State, the Lord Chancellor.
Well, that's what she says.
Except the fact that she had someone in the meeting.
Well, we had Robert Jenrick on the show this morning,
I heard.
and he said, I said, how did you find out? Because if we hadn't found out from him, who knows, it might have just gone on. Basically, he got an email from a magistrate who was very worried about this new instruction that he was getting from sort of central office, if you like. So
the plot thickens slightly this afternoon in the fact that it turns out that this consultation on all of this was launched under Alex Chalks, the previous Justice Secretary.
Although Jenrick says that was a completely different scenario, and in fact it was recommended.
So a bit of muddy in the water.
Yeah, it was recommended not to go ahead. This is one of the things they do. Rather than now just blaming the Tories for the 22 billion black hole, they now say, oh, everything was started under the Tories. The Chagos Islands negotiations started under the Tories. Two-tier justice started under the Tories. If they can't blame them for something, they give them credit for it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, look, coming up, we've got the 26th of March.
Yeah.
We've got Rachel Reeves's
can't wait.
Act 2.
Yeah.
I mean, you love the budget.
I'm sending all my money to Switzerland, by the way, before she does that.
If you liked the budget and the £40 billion tax cuts,
yes,
tax rises. No, there were no tax cuts except for drivers. We liked that one.
Yeah.
The part 2 is here come the spending cuts. Do you think it's going to... She's obviously in a bit of a tricky position. She had a bit of a wobble in January.
Yeah.
The gilt's going back up. The long-term borrowing is going back up today.
Yeah.
The markets are watching her like a hawk.
Right.
We were talking to John Redwoods about this earlier. Do you really think that this Labour government have the balls, I'm going to say it, to actually cut £5 billion off of the welfare bill, take a proper, hard, stern tone to the NHS, who've come back and said we need more. Thanks for the £10 billion in November. We need more.
Right.
Or do you really, do you think she... And even if she does, can she get it through her party?
Well, the thing is, she's already in hock to the unions, right? So it's going to be...
It's not
going to be much longer before one of the rail unions comes back for another few percent.
Yeah, well, they've got a new leader today, Eddie Dempsey.
Yeah.
It's not he's actually a communist. So,
he's the guy that was pictured, I think, in Ukraine, was he not? With some sort of paramilitary types. Paramilitary types,
indeed,
I mean, he's not the acceptable face of communism, that guy. But, she's going to get pressure from the public sector unions. Teachers want more money. Nurses are going to come back for some more. Doctors are going to want more money. GPs they've just settled with. They're giving them more money.
Soldiers as well.
So they want more defence money, and they haven't got anywhere to go. I don't think.
Well,
I don't think she knows what she's doing.
I think the Labour Party also thought they'd come in. Everything would be easier because they're nicer and they're Labour, and so therefore the civil service would be nice to them and the unions would be nice to them. And that sort of naivety is just hit the wall of reality in a spectacular fashion.
Yeah, because one, they're not nice. They're actually really, really quite dastardly. They don't like British people. They like to promote.
I think some
everybody.
of them do.
Well, I don't think so. I've yet to find one. They never come on my show. I mean, you're lucky enough to get to talk to some of them. I see you had the arms. No, but nobody from the Labour government comes on my show because I can't imagine why. They don't want to be asked tough questions. I don't know. Maybe they just don't like me. I don't care. But most of the things that they say turn out not to be true. I mean, Keir Starmer put out a tweet this afternoon saying that, the people of this country deserve to be safe in their communities. We are going to make sure that that's our #1 priority. Well, the streets of Britain have never been more dangerous. There are people coming into this country, by the thousand, and there's going to be more thousands of them by the time she does her budget, who are coming here. We're going to be wasting more millions and millions of pounds on illegal migrants. The streets are going to be more dangerous. More people are going to be stabbed and shot and raped. It's disgusting.
I was in Washington last week when Keir Starmer was there, stayed for the weekend, and I was walking down the street, actually. It was a really strange feeling. I was walking down the street, and I was on my phone, and I was just sending some texts, and I had my headphones in. And I couldn't put my finger on it. I was like, why does this feel weird?
Yeah.
And I realised I was walking down the street in 7 o'clock at night with my headphones in, which I don't do in London because if I have them on, I'll turn them down so I can hear what's coming. And I'd never stand at the traffic lights in this country anymore.
No.
Because I learned the hard way too many times.
Me too.
With a phone, it's extraordinary that you almost your habits change. Purely, it's just not right.
I mean, the country is in a dire state. I mean, we did a story today about the giant rats in Birmingham.
I saw rats the size of cats.
Huge rats the size of cats.
I literally, the first thing I said when I walked in this office this morning, I said rats the size of cats.
Exactly right. I mean, the councils are failing their people. They're charging everybody more council tax. They're emptying fewer bins. People are chucking their rubbish into the street. The streets are filthy. The NHS doesn't work. Starmer wanders around as if he's, Henry Kissinger or, Tony Blair or somebody. He's not. He doesn't have the credibility. He doesn't have the brains, and he certainly doesn't have the courage of either of those guys.
What about the previous Prime Minister? We talked about this very briefly this morning, though, but we've still got my goat a little bit. You saw the previous Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, pop up on the BBC. We'll give him the credit for it. It was a good interview, where he said, "Oh, you know what? Maybe we should leave the ECHR now."
Yeah.
And he said, "Do you think the general election could have been different?"
Right.
The result. Do you think the Tories were done anyway, or do you think actually, if Rishi Sunak had come to this conclusion a year ago, 18 months ago, the result could have been different. They might not have Nigel Farage.
I think it's possible. I think what they failed to do, the Tories, was put any pressure on Labour whatsoever. Labour coasted into power without having to say really very much of anything. They said one or two kind of very, very loose policy scenarios might happen, which haven't happened, by the way. They broke their promises to most of the British public. But I mean, they should have put more pressure on Labour by doing something. They didn't do anything. When Labour first got in, I said the biggest danger with these people is they're actually doing stuff which is harming Britain. The Tories for 2 years didn't really do do anything.
Yeah, well, a long time. I mean, Boris got whacked by the pandemic. I think he probably would have done something.
And by his own people.
Yeah,
but the Tories always do that, don't they?
Well, talking of civil wars and being whacked by their own people, the reform war continues. Amanda says, I worry about Reform UK. They seem to fall out with good men. First, the brilliant Ben Habib, who regular talk listeners will know all about him, and now Rupert Lowe. Nigel is this country's Trump. Onwards and upwards for Reform UK, says Amanda, while an anonymous text says, look out, Mike Graham, there's a new kid on the block.
Listen, there's always a new kid on the block, and I'm very, very happy to give you an extremely warm welcome.
No, well, listen, I appreciate
if you want to go over 4:20 tomorrow, be my guest.
I get up at 8:15 on Monday. You're the only man that can get me out of bed at 8 o'clock on a Monday morning. No, but it is strange. The roles are reversed.
It's great.
Thanks for coming on.
We need as much talent as we can get. There's not enough decent broadcasters in this country with the right views.
I'm going to...
Honestly.
I am an impartial observer of all things.
My mistake.
Mike, I'm going to flip it round, though.
Yeah.
We're going to let you go in a minute. We're going to have to go to the news. But I'm going to flip this round. You say everything's going down the Swanee, but what's the good news? Come on. What are you confident about? What makes you happy? What is one thing that Mike Graham could, gets you out of bed in the morning and says, you know what, it's going to be okay?
Well, the good news is that Britain always recovers. We always get through it. We will get through it. There are people ringing me up this morning.
Meet again.
3 people rang in today to say they were leaving the country. I mean, I'm not joking.
I heard that guy.
But the people are doing that.
You're not going anywhere.
I'm not going anywhere. No, because I'm going to fight them, and I'm going to stay here. And the good news is the weather's going to be great. And it's barbecue weekend. I'm telling you,
it's nearly rosé season.
Yeah, I'm going to be. Well, listen, rosé season all year round for me.
It's very strict season.
The Cad-Eye is going to be out tomorrow. When I get down to Sussex, we're going to sit in the garden, open a bottle of champagne, and sit in the sunshine. And that's what the good news is.
How the other half live. Mike, you got a big show tomorrow. Who's there?
We've got a big show tomorrow. I don't know who we've got on it yet because they're all still working on it.
Still being fast asleep.
I've got to throw. Then they give me the show, and then I tear it all up and start again, and then they'll be working till about midnight doing it. But I mean, it's a big Friday, so going into the weekend, Trump is obviously going to be huge again tomorrow. Starmer, I don't know what Starmer's doing.
Rupert Lowe versus
the Rupert Lowe battle will go on,
and it's nearly Cheltenham week, so you can you can probably have a look at that. Gut instinct, will Rupert Lowe walk?
I think he will.
Oh dear! It's time for the news. Good evening, welcome back to Talk Drive Time. I'm Harry Cole of The Sun with you for one more hour until 7 p.m. Coming up, two-tier justice, the smoking gun. The Conservatives are gearing up to challenge the controversial new sentencing guidelines that favour criminals from ethnic, religious and gender minorities. We have a member of the Shadow Cabinet sitting opposite me right now. We put all that to him, but Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick is threatening a judicial review unless Labour changes the law to block the new rules. Justice Secretary herself says she's already urged the Sentencing Council with a very firm letter to scrap these guidelines. Lots more on that ongoing story. Meanwhile, over in Brussels, the coalition of the willing is beginning to take shape. Up to 20 countries are now backing Sir Keir Starmer's plan to send peacekeeping troops to Ukraine. But we had the Armed Forces Minister Luke Pollard on earlier, and there are still a lot of questions remaining about how that would work. And as the Prime Minister scrambles for support, Donald Trump ratchets up the pressure on President Zelensky to agree a peace deal. But peace at what price? And an astonishing row has broken out tonight between Nigel Farage, who was on the show, and Rupert Lowe, possibly the second most famous member of Reform. Two big beasts of a very small party going head to head. It's splitting opinion on the text. You can call in if you want to talk about that. Give me a call, 0344 99 1000. One day I will get that number right. But if you want to text, it's text talk to 87222, or you can get in touch on X at talkTV. Let's give that number one more go. 0344 99 1000. One day I will get that right. But joining me now is the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, to give him his full and correct title, and Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary, Alex Burkhart. Alex, you must be laughing at, finally, another political party tearing itself to shreds, as the Conservatives have done for, good 10 years now.
Yeah, it was interesting to see how Nigel responded to the question you put to him about Rupert Lowe. Because I think Rupert's done this interview in one of the papers saying, if he's going to stand with Nigel at the next election, Reform are going to have to come up with some ideas. And it's clearly tested Mr Farage's patience a bit, hasn't it?
Well, look, you know what it's like to be in a party that is, quite unpleasantly at war with itself. I think the Tory party at the moment is a little bit calmer. It seems to me it's united only really in exhaustion, and sort of they don't want to go back down that road of civil war.
No, I don't think it's just exhaustion, and I think we took a hell of a beating last year.
You did, and many people would say deservedly so.
The voters are never wrong, and they kicked us out for a reason, and that means we've got to reflect. And there's no doubt about it. If we carried on fighting like we were with each other before the election, we're not going to get it back into power.
Yeah.
And I think we're in the process of learning that lesson and taking stock and trying to win back the trust of the British people so that we can mount serious opposition to this dreadful government that is in the process of putting up people's taxes, putting up regulation, breaking a hell of a lot of the promises that they made in the general election and letting the country down. So, we aspire to be able to hold them to account.
It's been several months now, though, and I think today and yesterday really was the first time I think that the Conservatives have landed a glove on this government,
that's right.
In terms of this two-tier justice stuff, which we can talk about at length in a minute. But why does it fall to Robert Jenrick?
Well, it's his brief, and Robert's a very good. He's a very good politician, right? And
but he seems to be on everyone's brief at the moment.
Well, no, I don't think that's true. I mean, he touches on everything that has a legal dimension, and he's done a really good job.
That is everything there. Everything. Especially...
Are you a lawyer, Harry? And that's the sort of thing a lawyer would say.
But the government, we have a government of lawyers, and they seem to be meddling in everything.
That is part of the problem, actually. That this is a government of lawyers. This is a government of. Maurice Glassman, Lord Glassman, Labour peer, working class guy, very, very bright, said the problem is that the government talks about the rule of law, but actually it wants the rule of lawyers.
Yeah.
You see that in Starmer himself, you see it in Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, you see it in a lot of their allies.
We'll talk about all of these things in a moment. I'm going to keep on the Tories just while I've got you on the ropes. Look. Kemi Badenoch doesn't seem to be cutting through in quite the way that I think a lot of it, even her most devout supporters, you were one of them, I think would have hoped she would by now, from the sort of gut instinct right-winger that they saw when she was in government. They liked, some of them liked what they saw when she was let off the loose in the campaign, but she doesn't quite seem to have fitted into the role of opposition in the way that someone like Robert Jenrick has.
I don't think that's fair, Harry. I think the truth is that there's a huge job of work to do after the election to get the Conservative Party match fit again. And that involves a lot of things, a lot of reorganisation, sort of quite technical stuff, but very important stuff in central office, raising money. I'm sure you saw the figures today.
1.8 billion,
Yeah, exactly. More than the other competitive parties combined. And we've had a lot of talk about other parties are meeting donors and people are moving away from the Conservatives.
Labour raised a lot of money before, a lot more money than the Tories before the election.
Of course it did. But now we have a new leader, right?
Yeah.
And that's if you one of the things that Kemi has been doing is making the case for the future of the Conservative Party, and she's got people to back her. That is one of the primary roles of a leader in opposition. So I think it's a very, very good display of the success of her work in opposition. But we have a strong top team. Robert's doing a very good job, past 24 hours on this two-tier justice stuff, which I think most people would find totally unacceptable. The Labour government is now saying they think.
I know what you're doing here. You're trying to get back off of Kemi Badenoch.
I'm talking. You brought me on as a representative of the shadow cabinet, Harry.
Okay,
so
one more question on Kemi.
Yeah.
Her PMQ's performances are varied, should we say? Good weeks, bad weeks, but the bad weeks are very bad and the good weeks are okay.
She is chipping away at the Prime Minister. She's exposing him as someone who doesn't answer questions, someone who's repeatedly patronising, and someone
she doesn't like it when he's patronising.
No, nobody does. Nobody does. And my voters don't like it when he's patronising, when he's demeaning. And at some point, this government is going to have to be transparent about what it's doing. It's going to have to start answering questions, and it's going to have to start facing up to the mistakes it's made. And it's not doing any of those things at the moment. And you all have seen, like this week and last week, Jonathan Powell, National Security Advisor, one of the guys responsible for the terrible Chagos deal, which I hope we'll talk about in a moment. I think he's the 9th National Security Advisor that we've had in modern history. All of the others have appeared before Select Committee, right? Before the Select Committee on Intelligence, and he's refusing to do so. That is just totally...
He's a busy man. I mean,
he's not. He's
trying to negotiate a peace deal, and
he's trying to give away the Chagos Islands. But he's not saying I'll do it when I've got time. He's saying I'm not going to do it at all. That is symptomatic of the sort of people we're dealing with.
So, look, the government of lawyers. I've given you a tough time on your own problems, of which there are many, but we can come back and talk about them again soon. But the government of lawyers, as you say, what they're doing. Yep. Let's take the Chagos deal, for example. Lord Hermer, obviously a lefty lawyer, as we would probably describe him in the Sun newspaper.
I'm glad you would agree on that. Yeah.
But they've got a point though here, haven't they? Because at the end of the day, there's an American-UK base on the Chagos Islands that is vital, we are told, and we know, to our national security infrastructure.
So why are we giving it away? Well, that doesn't make it go on. There's
a ruling at the ICJ that says that it's not non-binding now, but they'll come back, and one day it will be binding. The Americans don't care.
Who were the judges on the ICJ? Come on, you tell me. You follow this story.
The Americans.
So let's tell the listeners who was on the ICJ court.
Sure,
an appointment.
But they will come back.
Appointment of the Chinese government, appointee of Putin's regime. This is not a straight court, and we don't have to follow this judgment at all. Look, as you know, Harry, I used to be a history teacher, and this is almost certainly the worst deal in history. When you might remember in 1626...
you were there. You might have been there.
I'm getting on with it. 1626, the people of, the indigenous people in northeast America sold Manhattan Island for 60 guilders and a handful of beads, right? And that's always gone down as the worst territorial deal in history. Yeah. This is even worse, right? We are giving away sovereign territory, and we're paying £18 billion for the privilege.
Isn't the truth that this fits into a much bigger global picture of how we are in the world? America has said, we want to keep the base. We are not going to pay for the base because we give you protection in space and underwater.
We have a good, long-standing agreement with the Americans.
And they're saying, look, if you think you've got a legal problem with it, that's your problem. We ain't going to pay for it. And the fact is that it is a non-binding
judgment. We do not have to follow this.
At the moment. You know what these people are like, governments of lawyers and campaigning binding lawyers and the Philip Sands of the world. They'll keep coming until it is binding.
The only reason this is a problem is because the British government is taking it seriously, and it shouldn't. This is our territory. We do not have to give it up. We certainly do not have to pay £18 billion for the privilege.
Stay there, Mr. Burke. I'm going to play you a clip now from the Armed Forces Minister Luke Pollard, who joined us on the show earlier, about another thing this government of lawyers or government of patriots, will you choose, are doing. Let's see what he says about British troops in Ukraine. Why should British boys be sent to fight, potentially, the Russians in a faraway land in highly controversial circumstances for another Labour Prime Minister?
Well, we're not suggesting at the moment that anyone is fighting. It's really important. What we've said is we want an end to this killing. We want a peaceful and durable, lasting peace in Ukraine. And as part of that, the United Kingdom and many of our European and Commonwealth allies are looking at how we can contribute to a security guarantee that would stop Putin from breaking his word, reinvading.
But peacekeepers get into trouble. Peacekeepers get fired upon. Peacekeepers die in combat.
What we have to provide here is a lasting and durable peace. That's what President Trump has been very clear on. That's what President Zelensky and his people desperately need. He's broken the ceasefire before. When he invaded in 2014, there was a ceasefire afterwards. He broke that in 2022 because there was no sense from him that there would be any consequences.
So Luke Pollard there, not really answering questions of how it would work in terms of British peacekeepers on the ground, but suggesting they need to be there alongside the Europeans. But the point I was trying to make to him is, how is the government going to explain, and what is the Conservative Party's view on it? I know that Kemi Badenoch says she has a lot of questions, but the principle of British boots on the ground in Ukraine, is that something you guys can get behind?
Look, you all have heard Kemi say during Prime Minister's questions this week that we want to be part of national unity on this, but we're not going to write a blank check.
Yeah. We
need to see a plan, and at the moment, there isn't a plan. There's just a series of ideas. You can't do peacekeeping unless there is a peace to keep. Well, there isn't a peace to keep at the moment. There is no ceasefire. There is still fighting going on, and it's not at all clear that that's going to come to an end. Look, we will listen very carefully when the government actually has a plan, and we'll take a view then, but I'm not going to speculate about this sort of thing now.
This is I think the point Donald Trump was making as well, which is that actually the hard bit is peacekeeping is the easy bit. You know, in fact, the US are still in North Korea, South Korea now, and still in Germany, frankly, for a short time more, I suspect. But the hard bit is actually getting the deal. The other question I put to Luke Pollard, and this does fall onto your patch very, very clearly. I said to him, well, how, he was talking about retainment and recruitment crisis within our armed forces. Why would anyone join up to the armed forces and fight in combat, potentially in incredibly tense and controversial circumstances such as Ukraine, where something could go wrong very quickly, if 25, 30 years later they're sold down the river by their own government? Yep. Tell us, listeners who might not be fully briefed on what's been going on in Northern Ireland, and why the SAS look like they're about to have the rug pulled from under them.
Yeah, well, this is a really serious case. So a couple of weeks ago, there was a coroner's report in Northern Ireland in response to an event that happened in 1992. Yeah. In a place called Clonone. And on that night, a group of SAS men confronted some members of the Provisional IRA who were very heavily armed. Yes. They were carrying they had mounted in their Jeep a Dushka machine gun, Soviet-made machine gun, capable with a range of. They weren't going for a sort of stroll with their dogs, right? They had a Dushka machine gun which has a range of about 1,000 yards. You can fire 60 rounds a minute. They were armed with AK-47s, and the SAS made a judgment and took them out. Yeah. And that was, I think, perfectly justified, given that they'd just come back from shooting up a police station where mercifully no one was killed. And as I said in the House of Commons the other day, if this had happened on the streets of Birmingham, or if this had happened in Parliament Square, we would not be having a conversation now about whether security forces should have acted as they did. And it's a sign that something is going wrong in our legal system, that these men now have a legal case hanging over their heads. And we've written, Conservative Party has written to the Ministry of Defence and said, you have to judicially review
And Keir Starmer
this decision.
in the Commons.
And Keir, the Prime Minister, said, I don't know anything about this. But we heard today that the Ministry of Defence is not committing to challenge this decision, which I find incomprehensible.
The Veterans Minister knows a thing or two about
well, he does, and that's why he needs to step up and protect, because the point you made at the outset of this was who is going to join the Special Forces under these circumstances. Are we sure that the Special Forces are going to be able to act as they need to, making split-second decisions, if they're worried about legal cases that are going to come up against them in 30+ years' time? And now, obviously, nobody can be given like free rein to do anything, but in the circumstances in this case, I just find the decision very, very hard to stomach.
Where's the Northern Ireland Secretary on this? Because obviously, is there any cross-party consensus on this? Are you finding any suggestion that the government might lean on this?
I have heard nothing from anyone in government to suggest that they are going to challenge this case. And really, it's very, very important that they move quickly and they show solidarity with our armed forces and put this challenge in.
But you will be there. Let's do some quick fire. Let's do some quick fire at the end. Cheltenham next week. If I'm not sure if you're a betting man, but if you were,
I only bet on the boxing, Harry.
I think I knew that. Yeah. You're a betting man. Kemi Badenoch will be the Prime Minister. Yes or no?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
When?
After the next election.
Will Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe both be in the same party? Is there room for Rupert Lowe in the Tory party?
There's room for everyone in the Tory party, Harry. I mean, you're welcome any time.
I don't think so. We've got Simon in Norwich who says, Alex Burkott, your party screwed up big time and betrayed the British people. You are finished. Your party is finished. I will never vote for you again. Join Reform. Well, what do you say to Simon in Norwich?
Simon, look, I agree with the first part of what you said. If we hadn't got things wrong, we wouldn't be in opposition. But look, we're intent on using the next few years to show that we're a credible party of government that can undo the terrible mess that the Labour Party are making.
Will there be a negotiated peace in Ukraine by the summer?
I don't know the answer to that. What I'm worried about, Harry, is that particularly with the Americans holding back intelligence now, it's clear that the Russians have an advantage. And so there's no intelligence going in, there's no aid going in from America. And that means that every day the Russians are going to be in a stronger and stronger position. And I worry that under those circumstances, they're not going to want to negotiate.
What's going to happen in the local elections?
Hopefully, Conservatives will do well. We've been winning a lot of by-elections in council.
Not as many as Reform.
That's not true. Check your numbers.
Check your numbers.
Yeah, the Conservatives have won more by-elections since the election.
Did you stand in more by-elections? I'm sure.
Yeah, no. Come on, Harry. It's basic stuff. You got to be on top of your details. Come on.
Alex Burkott, Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary, Essex MP. Thank you for joining us. Coming up after the break, we'll be joined by Dr. Chris Parry, former NATO commander, to discuss all of that in Ukraine, all of that about troops. Get your calls in, don't go away. Look, this decision is clearly crackers. The Secretary of State is saying that actually she has no power to stop it because it's going to come into force on the 1st of April by hook or by crook. That's wrong. She has the power to change the law. Labour have a massive stonking majority. Kemi Badenoch's out this morning and saying, we will back you. A one-line bill to say this is not happening. Yeah. Parliament are the lawmakers. For too long, we keep seeing this. We saw it under Sunak as well, and Keir Starmer does it the whole time. He goes, oh, well, it's the law. The law says that. Well, if the law is an ass, change the law.
Yes.
You have. What is the point of having this stonking great majority? Welcome back to Talk. I'm Harry Cole. This is Drive. Shortly we'll be speaking to Dr. Chris Parry about all that in Ukraine. But first, let's talk to David in Exeter. David, you there?
Hi, Harry. Yeah, I can't wait to listen to what Chris Parry's going to talk about. I was working with him in the Brexit campaign.
Yes.
European Defence Union. Listen, I rang in because I wanted to challenge directly what Luke Pollard had said about the status. So currently we're dealing with our military since decades of now being set to be a deterrent force. So, i.e., they stripped out its capability through under-resourcing it, that it couldn't be a force that could go anywhere, anything other than the other side of the channel and intervene. So the defence spending that he's talking about in the timescale is absolutely a nonsense. It will take far, far, far more to fill the void of the underinvestment to get it ready to go and intervene somewhere. So the 2.5%, the timescale, is nonsense. It may even be double it may even be double to fill the void to get it into shape that Trump's talking about 5%.
Yeah.
But the problem we've got is to shift it from a force that's a deterrent force, because that's its current status. It's not set as a force capable of intervening. We've had since 1991, when Blair took power, the under-resourcing has kicked in. And this magnitude is enormous, and that's both Labour and Conservative governments. Obviously, Cameron and Osborne gutted it even further in 2010. Now, to rectify this, we've got to look at the key bits. The MOD isn't a functioning HQ.
Well, that's what Luke Pollard was basically saying, though, David. He was saying this is going to take a long time and it's not fit for purpose, essentially.
It's not fit for purpose. It's exactly what General Sir Richard Barron said in Defence Committee in 2018, and I was sat behind him. And what he said at that point was critical, that there were pages and pages of analysis back then, dating back, saying we were in a very different climate with Russia and government wasn't listening.
Yeah,
so we should have been rearming 10 years ago, but they've chosen not to.
It all sounds very familiar. David, next, we're going to go to Chris Parry and we'll put some of your points to him. Thank you for calling. Rear Admiral, are you there?
Yeah, good evening, everybody.
I don't know if you heard David's call there, that the wake-up call is too late. The minister has basically admitted it now. He wasn't in power for the last 15 years, but they've both got a point, is that this is too little too late, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, I retired in 2008 and I was saying it loudly and strongly then. I was also saying that Russia was the key threat that the UK would have to face. I'm afraid to say that if you rely on electoral politicians to do strategy, you're going to be disappointed. That's all they're interested in, I'm afraid, is the next election. They're not interested in the long-term security of this country.
Do you believe Keir Starmer, when he sort of had this sort of Damascene conversion to 2.5 and 3%? I know we've talked about this before, but people are saying that's a bare minimum you really need to stand still. Prices are up, wages are up. We've given half our kit away to, our stockpiles are empty and need replenishing. Too little, too late, or will it make any difference?
Harry, whenever I hear anybody talking about percentages of GDP for defence, I reach for the safety catch of my revolver.
Don't do that.
What we need to do is talk about capabilities, and if we need the capabilities to defend the country and to deter our opponents, then we have to pay the price. It's as simple as that. We have to be more efficient. We have to cut out all the process that I'm afraid bedevils the political military interface, and we have to be honest about what we can do. Right now, we're not being honest about what we can do. We cannot go to Ukraine right now and deter the Russians from taking liberties. If you are going to go and deter somebody, you have to be prepared to fight, and we cannot fight. It's as simple as that.
Well, that's what Luke Pollard, the minister, who was, I'm looking at an empty chair where he was sitting right there earlier. He said, well, they're not there to fight, they're there to peacekeep. But essentially, peacekeeping is fighting if it goes wrong. Peacekeepers die in battle all the time.
Harry, it's absolutely ludicrous for a minister to talk like that.
Yeah.
He's got no background in military theory or deterrence. The fact of life is, if you're going to deter an enemy like Russia, you have to be prepared to fight, and you have to have the rules of engagement to do that. If you just go as peacekeepers, you're just camping for fun, frankly. It's just like the Balkans all over again. And what happened there? The European nations had to have the United States come and bail them out. That's the only way the Dayton agreements occurred. So I'm afraid to say there are a lot of people who've never been in the military talking about strategy, talking about all sorts of ambitious designs. And I'm afraid to say we need to actually ask very serious questions of them about what they're trying to achieve.
But in a way, then, you're almost in agreement with the Prime Minister that any credible deterrent, any credible involvement of European troops in any peacekeeping force or any overseeing force will require the might of America and the backstop of America and American power behind it.
Well, not entirely. The best peacekeepers for Ukraine are Ukrainians, Harry. And what we need to do is arm the Ukrainians to the teeth so that the Russians won't go anywhere near them. We can have high reaction forces in neighbouring NATO countries. And unless, as I said, they're prepared to fight and are given the rules of engagement to fight, there's no point in putting them in Ukraine. They're a very tempting target for Russia to escalate and also claim that they're taking on NATO. And let's not forget, Vladimir Putin has said he's not going to put up with NATO troops, peacekeeping or otherwise, in Ukraine. So I'm afraid to say there's no strategy. The government, I'm afraid, is just grandstanding, and they're playing at soldiers.
Well, I've got you here. I don't know if you heard the previous guest on, was Alex Burkhart, the Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary, who was talking about the alarming case coming out of Northern Ireland in the last week or so, and the fact that the Prime Minister and the Veterans Minister will not commit to judicially reviewing the SAS verdict that says that they were on the hook for killing terrorists, essentially. What are you hearing on that? How damaging and dangerous is that at a time when we're already suffering from a recruitment crisis? And why would anyone join the special forces if they thought their country would sell them down the river 30 years later?
Well, why would anybody join the armed forces, let alone the special forces? It's absolutely ludicrous where you have people with very selective, should we say, judgment and very selective backgrounds making judgments about situations that they have no experience of. And I have to tell you, we've got a lot of bias, I'm afraid, in some of our institutions at the moment, and that has a deleterious effect on these sorts of judgments. But, I've been in court before as a specialist witness, and I've been asked, whether a reasonable person would do something like this. And I say, unless you've been in combat, unless you've been in these situations, you cannot possibly understand what is reasonable in the circumstances. And I'm afraid at the distance of 30 or 40 years, it's absolutely ludicrous to expect a judge to be able to make that call.
Is there, do you fear the sort of politicisation of these decisions, though? It strikes me that we don't see many IRA terrorists in court.
Yeah, I've seen quite a few of them, and, they should be, there's no doubt. But if you give, I'm afraid, over 100 murderers a free pass as part of the Good Friday Agreement, then the whole judicial process collapses. There's no equity, there's no fairness. We've got murderers walking the streets at the moment free. It's disgraceful.
And one of the key architects of the Good Friday Agreement, Jonathan Powell, now back as National Security Advisor. So the circle of life goes on. Dr. Chris Parry, Rear Admiral, thank you for joining us as ever on Talk. Coming up after the break, we meet a very special guest. He is a man that knows tomorrow's news today. He's not the Bond villain, but he is our news editor downstairs at The Sun. Alex Goss will be us. And of course, we're here for more calls as well. 03444 99 1000. Getting so much better at saying that. And text. Keep the texts coming. They've been the texts have been keeping me going in the last 3 hours. Text talk to 87222, followed by your message. See you after the break. Welcome back to Talk on Drive on Talk, rather. I'm Harry Cole, joined now by a very special guest, Alex Goss. You are the head of news in the world's greatest newspaper. Before we even get into what's in the paper, I'm always fascinated because every time I ever speak to you, you seem to be awake. Be it late at night, first thing in the morning. Do you just sort of live news?
It has to be in your veins, I'm afraid. And with the 24/7 world of news gathering, digital publishing, and the way the globe turns, there is very little sleep, unfortunately. But we do have our dedicated news desk coffee machine, which keeps us fueled.
Yeah. Well, look, you're basically in charge of collating an ever-growing list of scoops, ranging from the straightest banana in Britain, which I thought was a good one the other day, the world's largest hula hoop. That was
always a belter, the hula
always
hoops.
A belter.
Snack-based news
Jesus in pieces of toast.
Yep.
Ham that looks like Donald Trump. That was a good one.
Absolutely.
But also, no, I'm joking. I'm being me. You are an award-winning journalist. What is in the paper tomorrow, and what's going to delight and what's going to horrify?
There's two very horrifying topics, and which I will address first. I think the most prominent story, which everyone will have seen develop this afternoon, is the guilty verdict in Cambridge Crown Court for Kyle Clifford. This man who'd already admitted prior to the Cambridge hearings the horrendous killings of the poor women and their mother, and now he obviously denied, seemingly inexplicably, the awful charge of rape. Jurors took 45 minutes to come back with that verdict.
I mean, 45 minutes doesn't exactly it seems they were pretty united then.
Exactly. And on top of that, you've now got a situation whereby what we couldn't report prior to the verdict was the added information that some of the method and influence behind Kyle's actions, the prosecutors were very keen to submit evidence that showed within 24 hours before committing the triple killings, he was researching and viewing Andrew Tate videos. Andrew Tate, obviously being the
male influencer who's wanted on charges here. He's landed in the United States. He was under house arrest in Romania. A worrying figure, and we always talk about how you wait to see the evidence of people like this, the influence they have. Well, here it is in.
And what's so horrifying? Prosecutors are able to confirm. So within 24 hours of planning this attack, it was only 13 days after breaking up with his victim, and one of the reasons she broke up with him is because they fell out because he was viewing Andrew Tate material. He showed in front of his friends.
So all of this came out in court, presumably.
Well, no, the Tate element wasn't. The judge said because Tate is such a quote-unquote toxic and misogynistic figure, it would be deeply prejudicial to proceedings.
So presumably the prosecution were trying to make it a thing.
Absolutely, and the judge concurred. He actually called him, the judge, a poster boy for misogyny.
03444 991 1000. If you have got any questions for Alex Goss and myself about tomorrow's paper, about this grim story, Andrew Tate especially, clearly a toxic figure. We talk about we've seen the grim videos, but this is the effect he's having on people. Alex, what else? That's presumably on the front, is it?
That'll be on the front tomorrow, along with the important message that comes from 4 British women who are taking Mr. Tate to the High Court, where they say very clearly the responsibility should lie on social media companies who continue to platform his dangerous messages. And they say the case should be a clear warning to world leaders and all those who belittle the seriousness of incitement of violence.
Without blowing my own trumpet, I was in the Oval Office the other day, the day that Andrew Tate landed in the United States, and we said, journalists there, we said to the President of the United States, hang on, this guy's wanted for horrific charges in the United Kingdom. We have an extradition treaty with the United States. Will you deport him? And Trump just sort of, he did his sort of classic thing. But do you reckon pressure will grow on well, clearly pressure is growing on for some sort of extradition? He's sitting there in Florida.
Absolutely. I mean, he claims he'll return to Romania for the appropriate hearings.
Right. But why can't they just put him in the back of a van and send him over here?
This is the big question. And I'm sure his victims want to know that exact answer as well, his alleged victims.
Right, what else is in the paper? I mean, it's pretty heavy so far, but what...
One last very important, very heavy story, and it's a great exclusive from our chief reporter, Mike Hamilton. Sidney Cook, one of Britain's most notorious paedophiles. He's linked potentially to up to 20 child murders across the 70s and 80s.
I mean, why is he... I'm not even going to go down that line.
Well, look, he's currently at HMP Wakefield, age 97. He's applied for parole a dozen times and we're doing so again in May. He was attacked last year by a fellow inmate. We've managed to obtain exclusive footage of said attack, and while it is shocking, I think the one sentiment that any right-thinking human being will be thinking, I very much hope in those fleeting seconds he felt a scintilla of the fear that he's.
I don't think people are going to be losing too much sleep over a notorious paedophile getting bashed in jail.
Absolutely, it's been the best read story on our homepage so far today.
So it's on the Sun website now.
We broke the exclusive earlier.
Go and have a look. I think, I don't think you'll be losing too much sleep over that one. Come on, we have dark and we have light in the Sun.
Absolutely.
Well, come on, what's your favourite light story in the paper tomorrow?
The lightest one, actually, we come back to bananas.
It always comes back to bananas.
We like a fruit theme. Ashley Armstrong, our business editor.
Absolutely.
We've been inundated by calls from concerned readers unable to get their favourite yellow snack.
What's happened? Don't tell me Brexit, no?
Nothing to do with Brexit.
Good, all right,
thankfully. It's actually the weather. We'll steer clear of global warming as well. I know it's another hot topic. But essentially, there's been 6 tropical cyclones in the South Pacific. It's held up the shipping, obviously, and then with the backlog of just-in-time bananas.
When a butterfly truly flaps their wings in where is it, in the South Pacific and Indian Ocean, we get no bananas today.
Absolutely, that's happened there.
What's the headline on it? There must be a banana pun, surely.
It will be. I cannot think it off the top of my head. The backbench will still be crafting it.
Very good. And Captain Tom's wrong'un daughter, back in the news again today?
She was indeed. We had an exclusive earlier this week regarding her plans to release her own self-published book title about dealing with grieving matters. Obviously, she's still a hugely contentious figure following the Charities Commission probe into the Captain Tom Foundation. We were the first paper to exclusively reveal the fact that they'd turned this foundation building in their garden of their
into
home.
The swimming pool,
into
duplex.
a handy spa. Who wouldn't like a plunge pool to go alongside their Captain Tom memorabilia? They've had to since rip it down as it was clearly a breach of planning laws. But most damningly, of course, They were handed a £1.5 million advance from publishers for his memoirs, and seemingly still none has been received by the foundation, according to the Charity Commission. She's now given an interview with a local media outlet, claiming £800,000 was left after fees. Some of this was donated, but tellingly she hasn't said how much. And I think, you know, any right-thinking person is going to be asking the question: how could not every penny have gone towards good causes, just as Captain Tom's original fund said?
Any chance of clawing any of this back? She's taking a low profile now, but I mean, she's not the most popular woman in the country, is she?
No, exactly. And I think, you know, I wouldn't want to overstep any legal marks there about what next steps would have to be taken.
Before we go to break, obviously, the massive story, the global story, it feels like we're living in history. Trump, Putin, Zelensky. It feels like we're in a bit of limbo at this one now. I mean, we had an astonishing dust-up in the White House last week. How much focus is there? How much the readers obviously engaged in it, but the story hasn't really moved on. What we're doing with drones, how are we keeping the story lively?
I think you hit the nail on the head. That's why Jerome Starkey, our defence correspondent, defence editor, is bravely on the ground in Ukraine. He's been out with the troops on the front line. This week he's been to 2 different field hospitals. Yeah,
we had him on earlier. He sounded like he's seen some he's seen some grim things,
some very harrowing elements. And I think it's the humanity at that end of it, the reality of that conflict. It's still a meat grinder. There are still people dying on both sides. And I think a lot of people are now thinking, you know, there has to be a path out of this. And it'll be very challenging for all sides concerned.
Alex Goss, go and get some sleep. You've been presumably up for about 20 hours. Our head of news, the man that makes or breaks my exclusives. If he puts them on his list, they go in the paper, no questions asked. Coming up after the break, we're nearly there. It's been 3 hours. Can you believe it? 0344 99 1000. Got it right that time. We'll take some final calls before I go and have a martini.
These sentencing guidelines were signed off in a meeting with all the bigwigs from the legal system, including her own representative, one of the most senior civil servants at the Ministry of Justice. So either she knew about this, and it is her policy, but now she's having to change tack because people are so furious. Either way, it's a terrible reflection. Look, I think there is creeping two-tier justice in this country. It's two-tier justice. We have to stop this now. The Sentencing Council have to scrap these guidelines. If they won't, we should be changing the law and ending their independence so that we don't have this situation going on forever.
Back, I'm Harry Cole. This is Drive on Talk. It's been a marathon, my first go at this, and it's flown by. But my favourite bit has been talking to you lot. So let's talk to Lee in Cheltenham. Lee, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. How you doing?
I will be coming to Cheltenham next week. I'm actually on holiday next week, so I won't be sitting here because I'm coming to the festival.
Okay. Yeah.
Lee, what can I do for you? What's on your mind?
Right. Basically, this net zero that's going on at the moment. Basically, I want to know who the scientists are behind it, because when you go online and you can see all these famous scientists like Ian Pilmer, and you've also got the other ones such as Tom Neeson doing podcasts, and they're all putting their names to all their research with decades and decades of research they've done themselves. We don't know who's actually giving the research to the government, and they don't put names or people who are there.
Well, I mean, there's the Climate Change Committee, who are, frankly, quite a broad lot of people, but they have some slightly, they do have some slightly wacky views. I'll give you what bit of net zero. What bit of net zero is grinding your gears? I mean, obviously we've had Nigel Farage on today talking about the deindustrialisation of Britain, talking about how we're losing our chemical industry, our oil industry, our cement industry. We're not making any steel. We're not making enough cars anymore because they've all got to be electric. And is that what was on your mind, or is it the heat pumps and the insulation and the personal cost?
No, it's actually the factor behind these lithium batteries. I mean, they're doing these big battery banks, and if you actually look back, and there's a lot of eco-climate companies that have actually reported back on it, that we're using millions and millions and millions of litres of water to produce these lithium batteries.
And the lithium comes from pretty grim places, but in pretty grim, with pretty grim records of how they get it out as well. What do you think is going to happen, though? Do you believe that Nigel Farage will be able to turn things around, Lee, and stop this drumbeat to net zero? Or do you think we're stuck with it?
I believe he could do, to be fair. I mean, because if you actually go online as well, and you'll see a lot of research about solar panels as well, and they're actually saying that solar panels are actually doing a lot of heat source now, which is basically causing the atmosphere to warm up in certain areas as well, which isn't very good either for climate.
Yeah, and also we've got all these windmills, but we have to turn them off when it's too windy, because we don't have enough storage to put them in. Lee, thank you for joining us. It's been a I don't know. I hope you've enjoyed the show. It's been a marathon. I think we've got a call from Alan. Alan, are you there?
Yeah, hello, Nigel. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm not Nigel. I'm Harry. But Nigel was here earlier. But you missed Nigel, I'm afraid. But I can tell you what he said.
Yes, that's very good. No, sorry, was it Harry?
That's right. Yeah.
So tell him what you're saying. Yeah. Well, we are I'm a pensioner, Harry. I'm 71. We are getting a bit perturbed with all of the money he seems to rob from the pensioners and give to illegals and to fight wars that we shouldn't be involved in. And we have to sit here like cold a lot of the times because we can't afford sometimes to have.
Have you lost your winter fuel payment from Rachel Reeves and from this government? Is that what happened?
No, I didn't lose mine.
Good.
But lots of others have. But it wasn't as much as we used to get. I think it was how much was it? We did get it, which we are very grateful for. But we feel sorry for those that have lost it. We feel bad for the people that's lost it.
Yeah.
If we could, instead of giving Ukraine all this money, why don't they think of all the pensioners and put it back in the national health? Because we can't afford what we're giving away.
A good point. Well made. Thank you, guys. Alan and I think your wife there, I didn't catch your name, but a very good point. Well made. Thank you for calling. Texts are coming in. Dear Harry, not all journalists make good broadcasters. See Robert Peston. But you've been a brilliant addition to the team. Keep up the good work. Carl in Derbyshire. We'll take that, Carl. Thank you very much. Mr. Cole, great to see you in the hot seat on Talk. From from Jim, looking sartorial as ever. Well, I did put a tie on. Thank you, Jim in Dorset, and thank you for Nikki for phonetically spelling out the phone number. I think that was the problem I got into in the first place. Nikki in Kent. Now, what a show it's been. I've absolutely loved every minute of it, and we created some news, I think. Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe. I wasn't expecting Nigel Farage to hit back quite so punchily at his fellow Reform MP as he did. Listen to that clip again from earlier in the show. Nigel, I'm going to give you one more go. We're going to have to let you go in 20 seconds, but Rupert Lowe, will he still be a Reform MP by the next election? What do you reckon?
Well, I hope so, but he seems to be taking a tone that says he might not accept us, but there you are.
Well, I mean, if that's not civil war, then I don't know what. Nigel Farage also said that, put a bit of context on this. Rupert Lowe gave an interview in a paper this morning, said, Nigel Farage is messianic. He's going to be, he needs to start delegating. He's too much of a sort of control freak in the party. And Nigel Farage doesn't take comments like that well. He took a lot of our calls, but I've never seen him as wound up as that on the fact that he needs apparently to have a shadow cabinet, even though there's only 5 MPs. But he got very angry when Rupert Lowe described it as a protest party in any way. He said that was utterly wrong, utterly and completely wrong. We're an entirely positive party. It's split opinions on the text. Lots of people saying that Rupert Lowe should stay in his lane. Lots of support out there for Nigel, but also lots of support for people who are saying that at the end of the day, it needs to be a new party. It needs to be a bigger party, and the party needs to be bigger than Nigel Farage. We also had John Redwood on talking about benefit cuts, disability allowance changes. Says there's lots of room to cut there in the benefits in the spring statement coming up at the end of the month. David in Cotswold says, I disagree with Mr. Redwood. Some of us so-called mentally ill do not need help to get back into work. The fact of it is, many of us are what they call the army of malingerers, but we are not. It merely needs benefits cut on. No, taxpayers no longer want to pay for this, but some people can work. Julie says, I know many people that are on PIP that are still working and earning around £1,000 a week. These needs need to be looked into, and if you can work, not get PIP, but good work. Anyway, so plenty of there. We were also joined by Luke Pollard. This seems like hours ago now. It was only 3 hours ago, but we had the Armed Forces Minister with us. He was, well, I mean, he didn't exactly give many straight answers. He's quite a smart guy, but he was clearly very uncomfortable talking about what British troops would do in Ukraine, and he said they certainly wouldn't be fighting. Let's listen to Luke Pollard again from earlier in the show. Why should British boys be sent to fight, potentially, the Russians in a faraway land in highly controversial circumstances for another Labour Prime Minister?
Well, we're not suggesting at the moment that anyone is fighting. It's really important. What we've said is we want an end to this killing. We want a peaceful and durable, lasting peace in Ukraine. And as part of that, the United Kingdom and many of our European and Commonwealth allies are looking at how we can contribute to a security guarantee that would stop Putin from breaking his word, reinvading.
But peacekeepers get into trouble. Peacekeepers get fired upon. Peacekeepers die in combat.
What we have to provide here is a lasting and durable peace. That's what President Trump has been very clear on. That's what President Zelensky and his people desperately need. He's broken the ceasefire before. When he invaded in 2014, there was a ceasefire afterwards. He broke that in 2022 because there was no sense from him that there would be any consequences.
Well, lively comments there. I'm not sure. A lot of heat, not much light. What will these British troops doing? Are they even a credible force without the Americans? And can we even afford them? But plenty of news there. That's the business I'm in, news creation. I'm handing over the mantle, though, in minutes' time to a former Sunman himself, TV Kev.
Yeah.
How are you, Kevin O'Sullivan?
Former Sunman in another century, literally. Yeah, a long time ago.
What's coming up on your show? We've covered a hell of a lot of ground, from two-tier care to disability benefits to Rupert Lowe versus Nigel Farage to net zero.
Extraordinary.
What a day, right?
All of that we'll be going down the same road. But also, while all this is going on, and while two-tier sort of fancies himself as some kind of colossus bestriding the world stage, the bridge between Europe and America.
Oh, that is one of the better Keir Starmer impressions I've heard this day.
But quietly, the migrant crisis continues apace. Another 210 came.
Well, you know why? The sun's out.
Yeah, 1,378 since Saturday. What is annoying about Starmer is that he likes to try to create a lot of noise and sort of vision to blank this out, because he's got no answer answers to the migrant crisis. So we will, of course, be covering all the stories.
It's always amazing, isn't it? The governments, Rishi Sunak's lot did it as well, and Starmer's lot have done it as well. They get a sort of slight dip in the numbers, and they start claiming credit and saying, well, we've stopped the boats, or they say, we're on course for 3 sunny days, not much wind. Look what's happening. And they're queuing up. They've actually been queuing up waiting for... you see those pictures, the size of these boats now.
Yeah, we call them small boats.
Small boats. There's 60, 70 people. And if you look at the average, the amount of people, it is astonishing. What do you make of Nigel Farage? Do you reckon he's going to blow up? I worry slightly after watching him on the show earlier that,
I tell you what, I think
the Nigel show.
I think that my view on Nigel Farage is a great man, and he should just follow his instincts. I think he's got a lot of people whispering in his ear right now saying, if you want to be mainstream, you better not talk about that, you better not say this, don't go... So I think that Nigel Farage should trust his own instincts and do and say what he feels and what he believes, because that's how he's got to where he is today. And I suspect that they're starting to think, we could soon be in power, we could soon be the official opposition, and they're trying to sort of tailor or temper their behaviour a bit in reform, and I don't think they should.
I think the public like a bit of the chaos, right?
Yeah.
Kevin, who have you got on? What are you most excited about?
I've got Isabella Oakeshott will join me first.